Father Eric. Um, yeah. Well, Happy woke me up, and I don't know if you watched um, last night. There's a lot of news going on, and I just got a message. Where's the real Jacob? Um, there's a lot of news and stuff, and I did a stream last night. Um, where I was hoping to discuss things a bit, and there wasn't much of a discussion. And honestly, Luke is streaming right now, and I was trying to listen to that, and they're not talking about anything real. Um, and I just went, you know what? I am going to stream and see if anybody wants to come on and talk about stuff um, with me. It would be nice if I could get some people to actually discuss real life with. Well, Father Eric, if you want to jump on, it would be nice, but I'm guessing you're getting ready for stuff. Yeah, yeah, you're at work. You're always at work, Father Eric. That's what I like about you. You actually do work. And I know nothing of politics of man. So, okay. Um, I wasn't going to monologue, but um, since Father Eric is listening, I'll kind of listen to him talk to him via the chat. Um, things are things are moving really really fast, including in the Middle East. Um, yeah, Adam. Actually, I'm wondering what you're seeing where you are. Not to dox you, Lance. There, somebody to talk. Let me get my tea. Let me get my tea. I will be right back. Feel free to say things about what you've been seeing.
Yeah, I think you and I think a lot of people. It's fascinating. What we're seeing is not normal, um, and that's why And I totally get it. Most times when we have things like this going on, it's just the same old, right? It's transfer from one uniparty administration to another. There's no really fundamental change in um, maybe how we're actually going to do things, in things that have big impacts. For us, we're in the United States here, but they do have big impacts globally. And while we most certainly, like, no politician is our savior, I think all of us in this little corner agree with that. We understand those things, but there are momentous occasions. And I did a quick Spaces last night, and the
On
other,
Twitter?
yeah, it was Nick who freewheeled and I, and
Really?
then we just wanted to chat. We just wanted to chat, and we didn't. I mean, I don't really have any followers. I'm not trying to get followers on whatever.
Yeah,
And
I'm
then
wondering. Hold on, like Lance, how come I
I
didn't know about this?
well, it was live, and then I ended up deleting it.
Oh,
Is it Chamomile TV?
yeah,
Who? Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Jacob.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Jacob. I just wanted to be careful. He has to be careful from. He works at a place that if he, one of the things he pointed out, which is like this stuff is really good, but he still works in a space where he can't be honest, right? Or he will lose
Mm.
his career. So there's these entrenched interests, and I would just say particularly like in academia or whatever. I mean, the tentacles are deep, and it's the thing. But one of the things I was just thinking about, Jacob, is what we've gone through and what we've been going through is very much, and I'm old enough to remember this, that it's just the beginning, and the empire could strike back. And, but this feels very much of like the Berlin Wall falling sort of a moment. Like it's
the Berlin Wall. That is exactly what I am seeing.
And, we've really, what is needed is sunlight, right? Transparency and despite all the things that might be able to get fixed in certain people and yada, 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 is I do think over the next 18 months, which is the mission of Doge, there's going to be a lot of transparency, and we're going to, I think that's going to happen as it relates to that. And the beautiful thing is like, Elon is such a genius. So entrenched bureaucracy and entrenched people, when you ask them for, our Department of Defense we can't pass audits because they won't share information in our government, right?
Right.
So the sense that you could rely on entrenched bureaucrats to actually share information with you or give you, it's not going to happen. So what do? The smartest thing you do, and this is the business guy move, and it's the right thing to do, is, well, we'll basically grab we'll grab access to the root system.
Yeah.
We'll have access to it. By the way, that's the way you manage an organization. That's not illegal in any way.
Yeah.
And we're going to shut this stuff off, and then you can come prove to me like why we need it. Right.
So yes,
it's brilliant. Like Jacob, it's
like,
it just inverted everything. And ultimately what they realized is, holy crud, so this is why, with respect to why is this different, is because they've actually seized control of the information.
Yeah.
And with AI and what these guys can
I'll be right back.
Yeah.
I'm listening.
So that's why people would say, oh, it's same old, everything else. No, it's fundamentally, it's just fundamentally different, and it's a non-governmental approach. And so, this stuff is going to see the light of day, and, with the additions of people in the cabinet that actually share a same mission of transparency, where this stuff is actually going to see the light of day. And that is for me, that is the Berlin Wall falling down, right? It's the transparency. And, because like Elon did the same thing. Like, I love this story. So he goes to Twitter, and there's, you've seen it. There was some data center. He's like, what does this do? Why do we even have it? And they're like, we don't know. And he's like, let's turn it off and see what happens. And he turned it off and nothing happened. Right. So why are we wasting? So, the point is that, and you can be nimble, and no one's going to die because you stop a payment, or that's not
generally.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we just went through a lockdown of people not working for weeks and months on end, right? I mean, so to make the case that, oh my God, this is so important, they're so essential. No, they aren't. And we have, this 80% remote worker workforce. And the thing that I think is so funny is that because they forced their way into this remote working, all of them aren't showing up for work. That makes it even easier. Like it's an Achilles heel. It's like, okay, we'll just shut off your access. It's just incredible. And I do think the key to this is not just that you have someone with the boldness to do things that people have been talking about for decades, but it's actually the Doge aspect of this is the linchpin of making this happen. And so as I've looked at this, I'm like, oh my gosh, they actually have found a way to beat the entrenchment.
Lance, what I don't understand is, where are the temporary restraining orders?
Well, the thing is like, so some of the arguments that I hear people saying, which is like, Now, there are a lot of executive orders. So, for example, JFK created the executive order that allowed governmental employees to unionize. And there has been some legislation around that, but that's still the linchpin that allows that, right? And so you certainly need to get legislation in to codify this stuff so it makes it harder. So on day one, certain people can't turn this over and so on and so forth. But the fact of the matter is that, and the Trump team is very smart, and they actually have very smart attorneys who've been thinking about this. A lot of this stuff, Jacob, is perfectly legal. Like they don't really have a leg to stand on. Now, there will be challenges, and Vivek Ramaswamy really laid this out well. And he described there was a parting of the ways between what he described was, and they're friendly.
Where was this? On the Sunday night stream or after that?
No, I think I think he actually talked about this. It might have been on the Breakfast Club with what's the guy's name? It's the morning show that's done. It's called the Breakfast Club. Any rate, he communicated that Elon wanted to take more of an technological approach. Mm-hmm. His technological approach is grab the root system, stop the payments, right? Let's figure this out. What Vivek understands is if you truly want to go after the administrative state, you have to fight the legal battle too, which I think is going to happen. So what are some of the things? So the Chevron case, which basically said they gave great deference to administrative rulings and everything. Is
this what you're thinking about, the Breakfast Club?
Yes. There was a little blurb in there where he basically talked about Elon had a technological approach, and he wanted to do more of the legal approach. And so here is the pending battle that will be coming up, right? Mm-hmm. They're going to want, because all this stuff is temporary right now, they're going to want to eliminate hundreds of thousands, if not 1 million jobs, right? Yeah. They're going to want to eliminate, we don't even know how many agencies we have, but let's just say it's 450, 470, something like that. We probably only need about 80, truly. And so the battle's going to become, they're also going to want to slash all these regulations and all this funding that really wasn't created by Congress. That was just bureaucrat overreach. All of that stuff is going to start to be challenged. And that's actually a good thing, Jacob, because we actually wanted to go up to the Supreme Court, who has shown it deference, or who's basically said Chevron's over. Yeah. And then we can, by the Supreme Court, get it to be the law of the land that these unelected bureaucrats can't do this stuff. Trump also has to move this into his legislative agenda to do that. However, via executive order and what he's doing, all of this, there's broad powers, as there should be for the executive branch, because there is no administrative branch in our Constitution, okay? Like on MSNBC, they call the administrative state the fifth estate. There's no, right. No, there isn't, right? Yeah. So so why aren't there all these lawsuits? One, it's hard to find standing, right? So people need to have standing. They need to have harm. It's just getting started. So all that stuff will come into place. Congress people can't sue certain things. So there's a lot of things, but what will happen is the damages and some of the effects will start being brought. You will see the government employee union bring some cases as they start eliminating, because right now they've just been placed on administrative leave, so they're not fired. Right. So there's no action yet. So there's no action they can file yet, right? Yeah. You'll start seeing some of that come, but there are very good, strong legal arguments. You have a Supreme Court that appears to be very favorable to understanding that the administrative state that has run amok, that they don't have the authority and the power to do that. He's going to need to bootstrap that in, I would hope, with legislation to make some of this stuff clearly more permanent, so on and so forth. So I would say, where aren't we seeing a slew of lawsuits yet? People don't have standing and harm yet. That's one. So you can't bring the suit until you have that.
No.
And then they're also reeling a little bit. And you'll start seeing some challenges. Now, a lot of things that they'll want to challenge, they're just going to lose on its face because the president has that authority through his administration to put in his administration to make these decisions. So you're also going to start winning a lot of cases, I think, very quickly because of the Chevron defense. When you start slashing like massive amounts, I don't know, 80% of our regulations probably were promulgated and all these decisions and everything else outside of the legislative purview that you could just get rid of them. And so you might not even need to get to the Supreme Court. So the legal battles are coming, and those are good. Now they'll file in friendly jurisdictions with activist judges who will go ahead and grant, do whatever, so on and so forth. It will work its way up. Some of them won't make it to the Supreme Court. It'll get overturned on appeals with respect to Chevron and some of these other things. I'm really thinking about the bureaucratic state, right? The bureaucracy. And then some of it will reach the Supreme Court. Always through an act of Congress. Now, it's going to be hard now. We'll see where they get to. If you got the Senate and the House and everything else, you should be able to codify some of the stuff and rein in some of those things. So, but again, all of this is like, you need to be able to use the tools to actually. They keep talking about this peaceful transfer of power. We haven't been seeing peaceful transfers of power because the bureaucracy doesn't grant you a peaceful transfer of power because they're not responsive. Like, we can't audit them. Like, nothing happens. They won't respond to Congress. And so, all of this stuff is coming down, and it is. This is not politics. So from my perspective, this is not a Republican or a Democrat thing. But this is, holy cow, for the first time in my lifetime, there's actually a move towards sunlight, transparency, and actually taking on the entrenched bureaucracy of Washington. It's incredible.
Yeah. So Ron, I actually did a discussion with Tripp about this stuff. I don't think Elon did a Nazi salute. I think that was ridiculous, but yeah, we had a bit of a discussion about that. So if you want to take a look at that, Mark says Sargon has a great video on all this. Okay, I haven't seen it. Honestly, right now, I'm not seeing a lot of great analysis by anyone anywhere, which is part of the disorientation. I was listening to David French's podcast, just to see where the enemy is, and he claimed there's an absolute shotgun blast of lawsuits coming out. I'm guessing he's talking to lawyers who are preparing these. I don't think he's lying about that.
No, that they will sue. Absolutely.
I've just been waiting to see what will happen. I've also been, so the Senate is all astir with the confirmation hearings, as makes sense. I'm wondering what the House is working on right now. And I think possibly a first maneuver in case there are lawsuits. I'm hoping Johnson, because Johnson was spending a lot of time. By the way, do you know when Father Eric said Jay Thomas licking his chops right now? I don't know who Jay Thomas is. But so I was wondering, like, Johnson was spending a lot of time with the team going to UFC stuff. And so they seem to have some sort of plan. And my wild guess is as soon as the temporary restraining orders start coming out, that's when legislation is going to fly in response to whatever the court says. But I don't know. And I have to say, again, for me, like last night, watching that Tucker interview, not because of any one thing that was said, but just the clear signal that the world international elites are like, hold on here, business has moved, and at least several countries have moved. I mean, I was just looking at this news article from the BBC. No, this is the wrong one. There was, oh, here it is. Oh, you guys aren't seeing what I forgot to show you. Israel minister tells army to plan for Palestinians leaving Gaza. Like, I like, things are moving in so many different directions. Obviously, Mark, why don't you jump on?
Yeah. The interesting thing, so BBC, 8% of their budget was being received from USAID. So now,
yeah, and the Politico thing, I mean,
well, so here's
$8 million.
And that was over a series of years. Here's if any of you are new and you want to figure out what's going on with USAID, there's a gentleman named Mike Benz who's been tracking this for a long time.
Yeah.
And he's disclosed it. He actually just had a Rogan interview, which you could tap into that. There's a lot of one. He's been
on. He was on Rogan?
Yeah, he was on Rogan 3 or 4 before the election, I think.
Oh, okay. That's a while ago. Okay.
And then he just was on Glenn Greenwald, maybe sometimes a little bit of a snippet. But the funny thing about USAID, and so there's a group out there, I don't know if anybody's heard of the Two-Way app, which is Mark Halperin. Now, his dad was a Washington insider. He's a Washington insider. He certainly is someone, and this is the thing you can't fall for. He certainly critiques Democrats, but make no mistake, he's a Washington political insider. And so he came out when we saw the payments to New York Times, Politico, BBC. We're funding 90% of Ukrainian media and everything else. And he tried to say, well, guys, this really isn't. There's nothing untoward here because, government employees need to read the New York Times. These are merely subscriptions and they need to keep up to. There's nothing to see here. No. Wait a minute. If these were just subscriptions so employees could keep up with the news, they could have funded it in their regular budget line items. Nobody's worried about it. What they used was the U.S. Agency for International Development, which is our Black Ops arm. That's where we fund organizations to build capacity to be able to win hearts and minds and prop up or take down regimes and so on and so forth. So it's dirty money. And like Mike Benz says, USAID is where the CIA goes when it's too dirty for the CIA. So the fact that they were buying these subscriptions through the USAID money, so the people that get funded by USAID, what's the expectation with that money? You're going to be a mouthpiece to push regime change across the globe. And we know now they've turned that against the United States. The other thing that if you really want to understand why all this DEI stuff in USAID seems weird, doesn't it? Well, no, actually, this is what they've been doing for well over a decade now. They understand that if they drop in identity politics and DEI in a country, it destabilizes it.
Right.
And so we've experienced that, right? So why are they doing all this weird, trans and DEI stuff in, across the globe and, Romania? Like, what are we doing there? They're trying to get people off of traditional values, destabilize governments. And so it's pretty simple. And so why did all these woke organizations and everything, it's also, but what happened under Obama with USAID is it was that kind of CIA front. it exploded to where they started giving all their friends through their 501c3s millions of dollars. They could sit on it. It was a grift. It was an absolute grift. And so it's a wonder. Here's what I'll give the left and the CIA and everything else. They're really good. When you call your CIA Black Ops Fund across the globe USAID, so people think it's something we're using to build, help feeding poor people in some country. It's wonderful statecraft and Minecraft. Like, it's beautiful. But by taking that out, and again, it's not being eliminated, it's being pulled into state, right, under the State Department. But why did you have to eliminate USAID? It was virtually 100% progressive left-wing radicals that were in control of USAID. You can't reform it, you have to eliminate it. And that's what they've done.
Mark, what do you have to say?
Yeah, I think I'm not even done with Sargon's video. It's called Victory of the Fellowship, which is way too optimistic. But I think that if you don't understand that 2014 was the year when things became clear, not when they started, but when like things were undeniable, and you didn't actually go to the playlist for Sargon of Akkad, I don't know if it was 2014 or 2015, where he said, this isn't just gamers, guys. This pattern is going to come to you next, right? And this is why people follow him, because his predictions have been dead on, flat out 100%. Gamergate and the exposure of Gamergate is happening all over again. It's just that Gamergate was happening at a scale higher up the hierarchy, right? That no one really was, not no one, a bunch of us were aware, right? But a bunch of people weren't aware of. And so what's happening is, as the result of people's fantasy illusions being shattered about how the world works, mine included, right? Like, I saw a video yesterday about some things going on in Israel that I couldn't have imagined would go on in Israel. And I was like, wow, I didn't know that was happening over there. That's not good. Now people are scrambling, right? Because they feel like the propositions, and we go back to John Vervaeke's propositional tyranny. I knew it was wrong, but there was something right about it. Yeah. When you just believe the propositions about how things work. Well, the BBC is funded by the UK government. Yeah. Well, it turns out if the UK government's not getting USAID money for the BBC, they also can't afford it. Oops. Right? Like, I didn't know that. I had no freaking idea.
Right? 8% of their budget, Mark, was being paid by the CIA.
Right. And I mean, there's other things like that I do know. For example, if we pull our military out of Germany tomorrow, Europe collapses. The whole thing. Bang. European Union done. Right? Like, and it's a subtle thing, because it's not like we're most of their economy, right? But the way it works is, well, we spend all this money to have the bases there, and then also, we give a little money to Italy to make some propellers for our boats, and silly things like that. And then there's all this transport cost. The military doesn't care how much money they spend, right? And so a lot of our military budget is actually just propping up Japan, Europe, all kinds of other places. That's why I've never been like, oh, we got to cut the military budget. I mean, yes, we have to cut the military budget, not as aggressively as some people think, because that would be bad for countries that are right now stable that wouldn't be otherwise. And maybe I'm okay with Europe collapsing now because I have been for a while, but that's a different problem. But there's all kinds of things like that, right?
Mark,
all kinds of things that
the EU
I
is
don't
our
even
enemy.
know about.
The EU is our enemy, not
Yes.
the members of, not the citizens of the countries of the EU.
No, but the
there
project.
there are ancestors and brothers and sisters, but
Right.
we need to clean up house here, but we need
Right.
to set our sights and destroy the EU.
Right. Well, but it's funny, right, Lance? Because the EU was always a project to compete with us. That was never not the. It was explicitly that. This is what they stated at the time that if you just look into the history of it, it's like the basic, oversimplified, to be fair, thesis was, well, the US is this size, has this many people, and therefore has power because of its economics, which is not really true, but partially true. And therefore, if we create something the same with the same currency and the same trading rules, which I get it, they didn't quite manage, right, then we'll be able to compete with the US. Yes. I mean, I have a video that I did with Adam on Navigating Patterns a while back about this, right? Like, it's called The Frontier of Ideas. The US is very much trying to copy its idea, not the actual Europe, its idea of Europe. And Europe is very much trying to copy its idea of the US because we're the successful dominant force. And we have been since long before the Great War, by the way, right? It was basically the industrial revolutions, because we actually had a couple in the US that made us a powerhouse, because effectively we stole the technology in the Industrial Revolution from England rather explicitly. I'm intimately familiar with that's the history of Lowell, Massachusetts, roughly speaking, right? And we improved upon it greatly. And then that just made us an industrial powerhouse. But people don't understand. We are the only place that has all the resources we need to survive.
Yeah, and I get, and for the EU, so for example, it makes perfect sense why the WEF and the EU would push a radical green agenda. That's not because they don't have those they do not have that resource.
That's right. If they don't burn coal, it's no skin off their nose. They don't have any to burn.
And so they don't have that resource. And so if you can radically, and that's why we were cutting our own throat with this stupid going along with this. Like in a pure sense, I get like in the pure sense, if the EU was truly was an honest person and truly working for the interest of its countries, I totally get it. And quite frankly, I would support what it was sold. But it's turned into something that is stealing farmland from farmers. It's turned into right? I mean, it's turned into this replacement theory, mass migration, which is destroying Western Europe.
It corrupted.
And so it has not served the interest of the people of those countries. Like, we need to get MEGA, make Ireland great again. We've already got MEGA, make Europe great again. We're seeing it in Italy. Like they're trying to squash these populist movements wherever they're popping up because the normal people realize that they're destroying us. But we have, which is insane.
Well, what about Germany, Lance? You can't leave out Germany and getting rid of all their nuclear plants and totally becoming dependent on Russia overnight for no reason, and destroying their own private food supply because they funded all of these solar cells in your backyard projects. And it turns out that you can't have solar cells and grow food in the same place at the same time. Well, I know real high IQ thinking here, and it really wrecked their economy. And that happened like 15 years ago now or something. This is damage that was done a long time ago, but it takes time to see. And what you're seeing is the collapse of a bunch of worldviews all over the place. And plus there's still the lies going on. Like I saw the other day, like literally last week, somebody was like, we could take 1% of the Sahara Desert and generate all the electricity needed for the entire globe or something. I'm like, guys, it's not even 0.001%. You're not even close on the math. I don't know what math you're doing anymore. Like, you guys are just ridiculous with the lie. They're insane with the lies.
And
right?
so I think because we, quite frankly, like you mentioned, we are kind of the linchpin, the cornerstone of in many ways. I mean, obviously you've got China, everything else, but how the United States goes and the positions we take dramatically affects. So if we don't play game play the NATO game, if we don't play the EU game, right? If we don't allow it to, if we don't do all those things, this thing can't stand. And so, we got to work on our own house first, or orders of love. We need to because sometimes you have to focus on your own house first when there's a crisis before you can go save the world. We've got to get our own house in order, but we have the ability to affect that change. And the really interesting thing, Mark, I was really curious at Davos, so I was watching a lot of those panels and stuff. I should find a clip. I'll share it with you, Jacob. But there was a panel of folks that basically said, Trump won, but MAGA won, which populism won, and we've lost. And they said, we've lost.
Yep.
And so we need to figure out our response to that, like they've said out loud, they've won, we've lost. Well, how would they know that? They actually know what the real support of the people are, the silent majority. They know that people have found out the whole system is corrupt across Western Europe and into the United States, and they realize we've lost. Now, the empire will strike back. And
No, everything's moved. Like my worry is everybody thinks, well, we're winning on the political front, so we've won. And I'm like, no. This is a bad take because those people are still there, right? And this is something I've actually been struggling with. I'm like, you guys talk about Rene Girard and like he's definitely a bad actor, but he's not wrong. Sacrifice is really important. What's the role of sacrifice at scale, and what's the role of involuntary sacrifice? And my case is still, unless people have punishment for their bad behavior, people will follow that pattern. And once you understand pattern, it's like, oh, wait a minute. So you take Mark's thesis, and this might be only my thesis, I don't know, but I'm going just by numbers because I'm too stupid to do anything else, right? 25 years ago, the numbers for news in the US declined. 25 years ago, they started to decline noticeably, and it was reported by them. So realistically, the Fourth Estate as such in the US collapsed 20 years ago. It happened a long time ago, right? And so when you understand that, you're like, wait a minute, that means it's been propped up by government as an arm of what we would call propaganda. I don't even like that word, but it's the closest I can get. So forgive my use of it, despite the fact that I hate it, right? So no, things are going to get better in the short term, but we got to keep our eyes out.
I was just going to say exactly that. Yeah. So Father Eric asks, so things are going to get worse before they get better? No, I think actually things are going to get better, and then they might get worse, but not worse than. So look, I think I've been thinking the model to think about this is precisely what we saw with the fall of the Soviet Union, which is, first of all, I think understanding what Nassim Taleb really meant by Black Swan event is really important, and the key to that, to the idea of the Black Swan event, includes after suddenly you have a black swan, right? So what happened was all the swans in the world were white until they got to Australia, and suddenly there are black swans, right? And people were like, and what happens is, well, people are like, well, of course there were black swans. You should have been able to predict that. Like,
figure that out.
Right? Yeah, figure that out. Why wouldn't there be? There are white swans, so there must have been black swans, right? And frankly, if tomorrow they find blue swans, everyone's going to be like, well, of course there were blue swans,
right?
But the fact is, right, as much as I would like to think that a lot of the stuff that we're seeing now was predictable, including all the way back from Gamergate, right? And to some extent, I mean, I think that this is why I pay so much attention to Peter Thiel, right? Like, yeah, there are times when you're like, why is he talking about this? And then a month later, 2 months later, you're like, oh, that's why he was talking about that. And a lot of things you can go back to what he was talking about 20 years ago, like, oh wow, he's seeing important patterns, right?
But Black Swan is discernment, right? I mean, it's about hindsight bias and discernment. So the story of Black Swan is we had a definition of swans. It was a very precise, accurate, scientific definition of swans, and there was nothing wrong with our definition of swans. It was perfectly serviceable, right? But then when you find a single trait, which is what happened, a single trait that's different, which is basically feather color, right? I mean, there's a little more to it than that, but it's basically feather color, right? And then And then the biologists, and they do this, like I'm not making this up. I've read this, right? The biologists will go into, well, there's only a number of possible feather colors because of genetics or some nonsense garbage that will end up not being true because that is the history of biology, right? So they go, this would have been predictable had you only listened to us, right? Which is false, by the way. And the reason why it's false is not because it wasn't theoretically predictable had you been paying attention. The reason is because you can't pay attention to everything.
Exactly.
And therefore, the fact that you didn't see that coming is not a surprise, or shouldn't be a surprise, but is a black swan because you can't see everything coming. It's not possible. Even if the data is available, the fact the data was there all along doesn't help you because you can't look at all of the data and all of the relevant data. That's why when John Vervaeke talks about relevance realization, that's part of discernment, right? You need discernment for relevance realization. It's unfair to say you didn't see this coming due to Gamergate, Jacob, but it's fair to say you didn't see what the specific results would be because nobody knew the extent to which people had been propagandized, how big that network was, right? All Carl Benjamin said is, this only came for the gamers, and you may think it's only gamers. And that's something that even I might, I didn't, but I was close to sneering at, like, it really is only gamers, dude. Like, get over yourselves, right? But it was tempting to do that. But actually, he was exactly correct. Exactly what was happening with Gamergate, only a slightly different funding source, we'll say, was happening everywhere. And it was that far back. I mean, it was just beginning back then. Gamergate might have been a small scale sort of experiment for these people to see if they could manipulate large groups of people that they understood were forces. The gamers ended up being the force, right? And not only them, but primarily them that caused Joe Rogan. And if you don't understand that, like, fair enough, you probably weren't paying attention. Hard to pay attention to enough stuff in the world, right, to understand these things.
There are a lot of dominoes. I mean, people are going to be looking back and it's exactly like the fall of the Soviet Union, where the day before, right, there was a vast majority of people were like, the Soviet Union is not going to go away, get used to it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? And I mean, now we look at Reagan. I don't think people realize in the 80s when Reagan, this actor, right, became president, like, people were losing their minds.
Yeah,
right.
They were.
And
crazy. How could this be?
Right.
Same with the California governor Schwarzenegger.
Right.
I'm like, do you guys not get the pattern here? But they didn't. Right.
Well,
right.
So
Jacob, how did the Soviet Union collapse? How did Reagan do it? Reagan and his guys. It was an economic collapse. There's a great 3-part series on PBS about this that's really good. I was like blown away when I was like, oh wow, I didn't even think of those, because you can't, no one can, right? I was like, I didn't even think of those factors. How did this collapse? It's an economic collapse, right? So it's funny, right? Because economics caused it, right? There's all this money driving into what we would call propaganda, fair enough, right? There's all this money driving into this lies and this DEI bullshit and all this garbage, right? And then eventually, like, it just runs out at some level. People are like, now, I don't know what we're up to, 12 trillion, 22 trillion, 28 zillion trillion, I don't know, whatever deficit. And then somebody comes in and says, we're going to fix the deficit, right? And then accidentally, effectively uncovers all of this stuff that maybe they suspected, right? A lot of people suspected this was going on, right? But again, nobody knew the scale. Nobody knew we were propping up the BBC. I couldn't have imagined that. That really struck me. It was like, what? We were giving them how much money, right? And then it's like, so the economic collapse, which is the thing that causes and this is why I don't like the term normative order. I mean, it's correct, but it's dangerous. Normative order is not what you want to use, because normative order is manipulated by the signal of money. And when you have money as a signal of success, and it is a signal of success, you get the idea. Well, all these people are doing this. All these people are talking about but they're all paid by the U.S. government in various forms, right? And they don't even know it. That's the funny part. These people don't know where their money was.
This is the thing that I think people need to put a fine point on. And it happened with USAID, but it was happening in other places inside the government.
Right.
And trust you, JD Vance, like there are some really smart dudes who understand. And here's the economic collapse. So yeah, you have your Soroses and other people. They can't fund the entire DEI apparatus in this country and across the globe. They don't have enough money. It took the full force of the U.S. being able to, put out, we'll find the final numbers on this of what the cost of this was and what was propping this up. It's going to be a staggering number.
Yeah.
When you take that out of the system, it cannot support itself anymore because they don't have the money. You are performing an economic collapse. And again, I'll go back to what I said earlier. The tactic that the CIA figured out with this identity politics, DEI, color revolution, all this stuff, it was the way they could destabilize governments, prop up and take down regimes. Why are they freaking out? They realized they're going to, with Doge and doing this, they've collapsed the money scheme. And so the same thing that happened to Russia, when again, it's an economic war, right? When you pull the pin on that, this thing collapses. And this is also why that the neocons and the left really don't care about weakening Russia, because the way you weaken Russia is drill, baby, drill. That's what Trump thought. Like that's what that would happen, because truly they are so oil based that if you take the cost of that down, you really damage Iran and Russia. So these things here's the other thing. These things are not that complicated. There's an illusion of complication. There's an illusion of you can't do these things. These things really aren't that complicated. You just need to have the will and someone who wants to be able to do it. One of the things I'd ask you, Mark, so I have not read Girard, okay? And so, well, but what's interesting is I know Thiel. So if you guys, then I'll come back to a little TLC thing. Michael Millerman is a guy who has on the background, is a super smart guy, has been studying kind of political philosophy and all this stuff and watching these things. And so he knows all this and he's been watching this happen. Like Thiel is Girardian and JD Vance also are people, at least they have some of that. I would like to kind of now go deeper back behind the scenes, because there are going to be philosophical approaches to some of this governance and where they're going. And it's not that you're just like some Girardian disciple and they only do that. But I know that Thiel has, and Millerman's pointed it out, that he's definitely a guy that has read Girard. And I think one of the things that I think I saw is Girard says is there's the myth of like realizing like the scapegoat doesn't know it's the scapegoat. And then once you realize you're the scapegoat, so on and so forth. So have you studied Girard, and can you see how that's playing out in Thiel and some of this, where things are going?
Well, one of the problems with Girard is that he's deliberately subverting the quote Christian story, right? I mean, and that's appropriate here, right? He's distorting the story of Christ and tying together mimicry and sacrifice completely incorrectly, by the way, just totally wrong. The two things are actually separate. All right. Sacrifice is an orthogonal or separate component from mimicry. The two aren't tied together the way he talks about. One of the ways you know this is that he actually said, like, almost verbatim, I can't quote him because I don't have my notes up, but that effectively the Satan is the way he is because he identifies against, right? He's not God, he's not goodness, he's identifying against goodness. And the Holy Spirit is exactly the same. In other words, he's the critique right? And the Holy Spirit is also the critique. And I'm like, that's completely wrong theology. That's everything about that is as wrong as it gets. And so he ties those two things together. So he's basically, everything flows from that. And if you listen to his talks with David Cayley on David Cayley's website podcast thing, you'll hear what he does with the language. He keeps moving what he's saying. So he says the same thing over and over again, but he changes a word or two here and there. And then eventually scapegoats are inevitable. Scapegoats are always innocent, right? And all this other it's clearly not true, right? Like scapegoats are a function of sacrifice, and sacrifice is not optional, and innocence doesn't play into it at all, actually, right? It's better to have a guilty scapegoat, though. So that's so. In other words, you have to hang the right people, and that's Girard doesn't talk about that, but that's actually true.
Let me catch up with the chat.
Sure.
Sally says, "Is this everyone has cheered up and had a cookie stream? Excellent." I'm not sure any stream I'm on is cheered up. That's not how Jacob functions. But yes. Sally, as somebody who's been around here for a very long time and seen all of this, I would love more of your insights. You don't come on stream very often, but always willing to listen to more of Sally. And frankly,
home from school. She's not coming on today.
Okay. Everyone should listen to Sally more. Second, Cal says, the problem is how do we keep this thing turning into post-Soviet Russia? So far, what I see is new media that seems to be just as bad as the old one. As one example, the answer to that is we don't keep things from turning into post-Soviet.
We don't have a new media. The fourth estate collapsed, and it needs to be rebuilt.
So here's where I'm going to put a tie to the TLC, Jacob.
Yeah.
So the left thinks they can't build. No one's going to watch them have their ideology conversations. People don't care about that. So one of the most powerful podcasts is the Joe Rogan Experience. Why is that? He's having long form conversation, hashing things out. What's happened, through the satellites of all the people of what we're doing here, long form conversations, hashing things out. That's actually in many ways, I think that's the new media. Like if you want to point to, for example, the one person I probably would watch, I guess I just don't consume any Daily Wire Plus content. I just don't really have any interest in
neither.
Them. I've never have. I don't, it's just not interesting. It's too slick or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Matt Walsh has done some important things. Personally,
all of them have done important things. Michael Knowles, all of them have done important things. But I really want to go back to this Russia thing. I do think the model we need to keep in mind is precisely the Russia thing. Look, Russia after the fall of the Soviet Union was, first of all, the rest of the world was better off. And frankly, 90% of Russia was better off. Yeah. Although there was definitely a lot of suffering, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right?
All change causes that.
Yeah, but I mean, this is the thing of not utopia, not okay, this is not going to be perfect. This is not going to be, and being realistic about, look, there's a lot of changes that I have been hoping for and been looking forward towards. And in a very real sense, the world was so much better off after the Soviet Union. But one of the most famous mistakes that people made was Fukuyama's The End of History. Right? Oh, history's over now.
Right.
And it was like, how dumb can you be? Right? So similarly, we have to, your head up in the sky, but your feet on the ground. Right?
The only people afraid of collapse are leftists.
And can
The
I make
only
a
thing
point
that's
about-
collapsing is a leftist agenda.
So I want to make a point about that. And this is why it's like a Berlin Wall moment, because that did restructure and there was a scrambling to try and figure out
Yep.
how do we organize and respond in this new world. It was the same of things that was happening in the Soviet Union, as all of a sudden people were, all of a sudden you had people out of communism in Romania's and things like that. So they're figuring it out. So then the West tried to figure out, how do we play this new game? They tried to go with this they coalesced around this WEF Davos kind of, Green New Scam, all this other sort of stuff. We were rethinking alliances, all this, all these things happened. And there appeared to be a world order that was coming together that we saw, that's how the West had decided it was going to happen. We've seen a collapse of that. This is the start of the collapse of that. Now, Western Europe is still in the throes of the control of that and trying to make sense of all that. I think what we're seeing right now is the beginning of, I believe, those deck chairs are being reshuffled again. And then Jacob, couple that up with what's happening in the Middle East, what we have right now. And so, with Palestine and what's happening and what the ultimate solution is going to end up being with that, and finally dealing with Iran and everything else, we are entering in a new age of what things are going to look like globally. And it is because this is the collapse of the WEF Davos class. And they know, and they know it. Now, they're not going to, the interesting thing is going to be, what I don't know yet is the empire going to strike back and try and keep that world order maintained? Or here's what I don't know. Because they've lost the populace, since they've lost the people, are they going to, they're going to reorder themselves and be like, okay, well, the game's changed. So, okay, we'll go along with this new game, and now we're going to try and figure this, that, and the other out. Like, it's going to be very interesting. That's why.
I think we have to go back to Soviet Russia and the fall of Soviet Russia.
Yeah.
And we could give other examples. I mean, I've been trying to think of historical examples. What the old Communist Party bosses didn't just go away.
Right.
And there was an attempt to bring communism back. But they're not going back to the old Soviet Union. That's not going to happen. Right. And I think a lot of it, we do have to just have the humility of saying, I don't know what it's going to be tomorrow. But I want to get back to the thing. Tayo said, I've been doing a Gamergate deep dive last couple of weeks. TLC makes so much more sense to me now. Yeah, when Clara, I was sending her, when she was trying to understand this, I was like, you need to look at Gamergate. And there's a lot of people, and this is a big thing with really Mark and Father Eric have been talking about. There's a lot of people who want to do this TLC thing, and a major reason they want to talk about TLC as opposed to the Jordan Peterson sphere is they don't want to acknowledge the history of Jordan Peterson.
That's right.
They don't want to recognize and submit to the principality which rules in this area, which is this history of Jordan Peterson, which does go back to Gamergate, right?
Yep.
And so, if you don't know your history, you're not going to understand patterns very well. And this is, again, one of the big reasons why I am constantly, no, we have to be the Jordan Peterson sphere, because, and I said this to Paul a couple of days ago now on my stream. I said, Paul, look, the new WEF is gonna be ARC.
Right.
The new WEF is going to be ARC.
Right.
Right.
Those structures don't go away. Right.
Right.
Everybody thinks like, we'll get rid of the structure. No, you won't. You might destroy it temporarily. And that's why we're not the fall of Russia. That was a governmental collapse. We're not having a governmental collapse. We're having a collapse of the unified information system. Right. And so we still have this tension going on between, oh, well, I don't want anybody having anything unified because they can use it against me. And those same exact people, and that's actually really important, right? Listen carefully. Those same exact people are saying, why can't we get along? Well, the reason is the same. Like, if you don't have a unified information system, you will never get along, right?
Well, and so it's
important that it's run by good people who are doing good work. And it used to be. The news media, the mainstream media was not always evil. It became evil after a point. That's important.
And so that's the big point. And so the other thing you'll see, and you'll see this in USAID. So I was a moron. I went down a rabbit trail the other night just doing searches. There's a person like Data Republican where you can go search and find all these things and so on and so forth. And so if you look at names, like, so there's a lot of money. There's like HIV, but there's also the disinformation. And so what you saw, like when you saw John Kerry saying that the First Amendment is a big hurdle for us, right? So they were saying this stuff out loud.
Yeah.
And by the way, the EU made it illegal to have free speech, and that's coming down the pike. And so our tech companies, Donald Trump's going to have to go to war with the EU on allowing our companies to exist, allowing free speech without getting fined and shut down and everything else. And so they were trying to grab control of the information source because what they realized is they had lost credibility, everything else. And so they needed to be able to cancel, shut down, deplatform in order to control this information.
False authority.
Again, that war has been lost. Like that war has been, the mainstream media cannot get back their credibility and their current, they just can't.
They can't. Right.
So they can't control the information sources. And to use your words, they can't control the signal anymore. They lost control of the signal.
Yep.
Now, we still have that battle for our friends over in Europe because they're going to be coming after this. And, there we go.
Okay, this comment. Which one is the real Jacob?
It's prescient, for sure.
Sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's good. And that's why, so we're in the last throes. And so people really need to understand this. If in the United States, if people believed that the mainstream media had any power whatsoever, and they do, because there were a lot of people that still voted crazy. But when the Libertarian Party came in and roundly decided we're actually going to support this group, the independents, you saw this break. Because if you would have believed it was a dictator, it was bloodbath, like all the hoaxes they run out.
It was a signal switch.
There really was an insurrection and yada 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 yada, and he really is a felon and all this.
Whenever you see the dissident group, right, the organized rebels are dissident groups. Whenever you see the dissident group move, right, that's a signal to the rebels that they have to basically decide. They have to get off the fence. And that they know which way to get off the fence, right? And that's why you're right, Lance. Right, but people confuse it. They think, oh, well, it was the dissident group, the libertarians, that swung the election. It's like, that's true and not true. It was their movement towards that caused a bunch of other people that don't agree with them at all, by the way, on anything, to also move in their direction, because normative order, as much as I hate that term, is a thing, right? Like, because you're mimicking a dissident group, because rebels you can't be a rebel, right? You have to identify at some point with something, and then you identify with the dissident group. That's what rebels tend to do, and then they split off again, because that's. And it was
what saved us was the hubris of the Republican neocon Democratic elite. Yep. They thought they had built this, remember when Obama came out, we built this electoral college.
They thought they knew how it worked. Yeah.
Well, they thought they'd built this unbeatable electoral college thing. They had made the bed. Okay, this is the new world order. It's this thing. We're going to be able to control everything. We've captured academia, media. We've got all the signals and everything else. And the hubris was, and really what they tried to shore up this last 4 years was, this was the last, from my perception, it was the last gasp attempt to make sure that they could seize total control, and then they blew it. Like, and their hubris is I think they felt like they could pull it off. And when, the amazing thing is that, like, it's clear that, like, the Democrats had Bernie, which were the anti-corrupt, like, they had a movement, and had they backed Tulsi and RFK and everything else, they could have won. But see, they didn't want that because they want the new world order.
They never wanted what they said. That they were always lying. Like, I keep telling you, no, this is easy. They were always just lying. You're coming up with these complicated explanations for why your candidate or the party in power didn't do what you wanted, and it's because they are doing exactly what they always wanted. It's just that they were lying to you to get your vote, and you never wanted to believe that. And I understand why, but also they were just lying. It's not hard.
And I'll give you one statistic which is shocking. I live in Houston now. 4th largest, 3rd largest, I don't know, biggest cities. This is not some small little red state blip. Black men voted for Trump 30 points higher than a Republican. It was a jump by, it was 30%,
Wow.
right?
Wow.
So think about, and so it's really hard to vote for the other party. I've put myself in this situation and I understand it. I think I'm the anti-corruption guy, but pulling the trigger for the first time for the other party, that's hard. Like, I'm just like, it's hard to break team dynamics and everything else, so on and so forth. But once the dam breaks and you get a jump like that, like, that's so sizable that, so you had the moderate, true populist Bernie folks have shifted over. You've had the libertarians, the movement that shift. This thing is real and deep. And that's why I think the elites, because they know where public sentiment is. They're not unaware of where the silent majority is. And what they now do with this is going to be, it's going to be very interesting. And that's why, and again, I keep coming back to people saying, oh, this is just politics. It's just the same thing. It's just Republican, Democrat stuff. Yeah, one thing's here or whatever. No, like you said, Jacob, and you have to look back. That's 100%, because what's happening with the fall of the Soviet Union, we are at that level of a sea change of trying to figure out what's the way to move forward in the world.
Yeah. So Emma, I know you're busy with the baby, but we could really use a classics student right now, because you are precisely the type of wisdom I would love to hear from. And Father Eric said, so the DEI folks don't have any monks. You need monks to survive the collapse. And I'm like, actually, I think what we are seeing is that the DEI folks did have their monks. They had their monks at USAID. And what kind of has happened is a Henry VIII thing of, dispossessing all of these monks. And what's exactly going to happen with that? I don't want to make analogies because I don't know the history that well. I would actually love for Marcus Shera, Dr. Marcus Shera, who's been involved in Bridges of Meaning and for years, and he's a real expert on the history of monasticism and economics. He has a PhD in economics from GMU, and like, there's a lot of people I want to see analysis from, because things have really, there have been tectonic changes. We're seeing a black swan, right? And I don't know what's going on. I'm not sure.
A bunch of we're just seeing the world more clearly. And one of the results of removing all this money from the system is that a bunch of incompetent morons are going to lose their wealth. And that's a good thing. We should all be happy about that, right? And you know, if there is enough goodness in the world, and I'm not saying there is, this may impact all the bad things, you know, the really bad things too, like OnlyFans. OnlyFans would be good to get rid of, right? And Pornhub and things like that may also get impacted by this. I don't know. I'm just hoping. I'm hoping against all hope. Just hoping that that's going to be the case, because we don't know what's tied into what and what's funding what and where all of, because it's not the direct funding that matters. It's the indirect funding that matters, right? And so when you're funding degenerates like Destiny, because we can say that now, pretty degenerate behavior, where's all his millions of dollars that he was definitely getting from some of these organizations actually been going? Well, we know it's been going to degenerate things, and who knows who's invested in what and how overvalued those investments have been, because investments tend to be forward looking, right? And if the future changes, stocks tend to go down because, you know, if you're looking at 3 to 5 to 6 to 10 times forward earnings and you don't know what the world is, uncertainty increases, everything collapses on the financial side, because that's effectively all stock market is leverage. Not all of it, but almost all of it is leverage. And so when that leverage goes away, because third order funding systems, so things that were funding things that are funding you go away, that has a big impact. I mean, it's certainly going to hit cybersecurity, which is good because cybersecurity's been, half of that industry's been a scam anyway. But I don't know what it's going to hit. I'm just hoping it hits OnlyFans and Pornhub.
Honestly, so yesterday I was like, okay, we're seeing these tectonic shifts. The news is behind. Like, would I invest in certain stocks? Would I short circuit certain stocks? And
oh yeah,
I was
it's
like,
easy to know what to invest in.
I actually don't think so. I was like,
investment simple, Jacob. It's always simple. You always invest in dividend stocks that have to do with physical items. The closer you are to physical items, the more stable the stock is. It's really straightforward.
Okay, so I
used to regularly make 20% in the stock market.
That's a Warren Buffett.
Yeah, that is a very conservative strategy that worked last week and works today. And trying to follow what's going on. I mean, there are definitely going to be a bunch of bankruptcies. I don't know what's going to be going bankrupt. There's going to be a lot of jobs created and a lot of people switching jobs.
But we were going to have to go. So here's the thing, like, hey, we're in the AI age. We just have to deal with it. Things are being optimized. There's efficiencies. The easiest thing you can actually get rid of is a desk job, quite frankly, which is the laptop class, which is a lot of the people who were sneering learn to code didn't realize that actually you were looking down on the people. Like a lot of the blue collar jobs are not easily AI'd and everything else. And so you're gonna see that. I think Tayo brought this up, which is really interesting. He mentioned laughing about something of diversity, and I'd love Tayo to come in. Like, again, what I love about the left is they name things so awesome. Like, it sounds so good. Like, my natural sense of diversity, equity, inclusion, I'm actually probably for those sorts of things, right? And the laws that are still on the books is you cannot discriminate. This has not been changed. You cannot discriminate based on race, religion, or creed in this country. And that's a good thing.
That's been forever, though. Yeah.
And that's a good thing. No, I am glad that that's in the thing.
And doubling down on it with DEI was a good trick, but it was a trick.
And the diversity, so like when you get to the second one, the equity, and so basically the equity principle is this. Elon Musk should end up in the same place as Lance Cleaver in his life. That's insanity. And it merit-based. And so here's the thing, and I don't listen to him much, but every now and again I poke in, but he's said this over and over, and it's true because we all know this. The way they were applying not merit-based or competence-based, the way they were applying these DEI principles is that you were going to guarantee that you whatever that company or group was doing, it would fail in the end, because if you don't have merit-based people, it will fail. Like it's guaranteed to fail. Like
But it takes a long time. The problem is everybody is fooled by momentum and scale.
Right.
Things at a higher level of scale, way up the hierarchy, have a lot of momentum, and they take a long time to fail when things go wrong.
And we've had enough of it.
And it's that you don't know what it looks like.
Right.
And so you think the temporary success means it will continue forever, but that's not how it works.
Well, and they're just living on, listen, most times when a business is transferred from one generation to the next, like it fails, right?
Yep,
because
almost always.
The talent, and so that's a big thing. But it doesn't fail the first year dad dies.
Right.
You can live off of
or the third. Or usually it's 3 to 5 years, right?
Yeah, you can live off of it a little bit. Here's the other scam of DEI, and so I follow a bunch of Black Twitter accounts and so on and so forth. They've always realized, they're like, you know who's getting these jobs? White liberal women are the ones that are benefiting the most from DEI. And it, like, they understand, they're like, we don't get any of this money. Hey, where's our BLM money? We didn't get any of this
They're
money.
used to being scammed, and they're looking for it. They have good discernment. And
100%,
yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
And you know what? One of the patterns that they've discerned, and this is fair enough, and I get it, their response has always been back, Republicans have given me no pattern to trust them. So you sit there, you make, well, why do you do this? And you're like, hey, you know what? You've done nothing to earn our votes, folks, which is true, right?
Yep.
And so it took it getting so bad, and where they really effed up in the inner cities, this mass migration and replacement that funneled into the inner cities, taking over their rec centers and everything else. They saw and they noticed it right away, the replacement theory stuff, and they're like, oh, no.
But they've seen it before, Lance. And to be a little fair, I mean, yeah, the Republicans dicked over everyone in the South after the Civil War, so partly because they didn't do 40 acres and a mule, although that wouldn't have worked, by the way. Everybody thinks it would have, but it clearly was tried in some places and failed, right? But it wasn't Jim Crow. It's what came long before Jim Crow. It was more that, and you can read the accounts of this because it's all documented, right? We had a primarily Black Senate after the Civil War, right? After they opened up the voting correctly. And they couldn't get anything done, and everyone was drunk, and it was a catastrophe for the country. And so the Republicans had to about face and give the Democrats the upper hand in voting to maintain control of the government. Like that's an actual thing that happened. So these things are not straightforward, because a lot of the reason why they didn't go to war earlier over slavery, why they wanted to do it slowly, was because they were right. You have to do it slowly. If you do it too fast, the integration can't happen correctly, and you have a collapse. And that's what we had in the South. We had a collapse. It wasn't due to the war necessarily, although that was a huge factor, right? It was due to the fact that they had to very quickly integrate a group of people that just, quite frankly, wasn't ready for it.
Right.
I mean, you're just not. And this is the problem. It's the problem of forbidden knowledge. And Plato talks about this in the Republic. Like, this shouldn't be news to anybody, but yet it is, right? Like, these things that happen too quickly cause a bunch of problems that, again, are black swans. You can't actually predict what they'll be. You might be able to predict some of the shapes of them, but not where they pop up. Or you might be able to predict where they pop up, but not the shapes of them or something. And you will never be able to predict the timing, because timing is just impossible. But that's what we're going through. We're going through another time where people have to integrate the fact very quickly that almost everything they believed propositionally about the world turned out to be an illusion. And all these things they thought were working were not working, right? They were just running on the momentum of money. And when the money supply ran out for whatever reason, you blame Elon Musk, you can blame the fact that the deficit's too high, or you can just blame the fact that eventually people caught on to these things. And now we have a collapse. But certain groups are very sensitive to these things. And to your point, Lance, like, yeah, the Black people knew what was going on all along. Like, come live down south, right? Like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, they've been
Extremely
watching this for a
extremely
long time
wise.
down here. They saw
Extremely
all of
wise.
this. They knew DEI was bullshit, and they knew what they were doing, right? Because some of them were like, well, we're going to support. They would tell you this in private. This is the funny part to me, is like, do you guys just not talk to people? Like, they'll tell you in private, like, oh, we know this is bullshit, but I'm going to get my piece, even though I know I'm getting screwed. They will actually say things like that because they know what's up.
Right. And absolutely extremely wise, extremely discerning, have seen the patterns, head on a swivel, suspect, right? Like it's absolutely the case. And I think a lot of Republicans don't get that there is a lot of sense of being a 90% voting block, even if that party's not delivering. There is absolute wisdom in that. And, the thing is that it broke so badly. And particularly these last 4 years, it broke so badly that it was just like, okay, this thing has got to stop. And that's why you saw, that shift. And, on Tucker Carlson, when Mark Halperin before the election said, if Donald Trump wins, we're going to see the largest mental health crisis in the United States. And it didn't happen. It kind of happened, but it's starting to happen now when they're seeing the speed with which, oh my gosh, this is happening. And what Jacob is pointing to, where are all the lawsuits? Because they can't stop it. And so the 30% that have, let's just say, the true believers, okay, there are still more than that don't like what's going on. But I'm talking about the true believers. And when Paul said in his video yesterday, for many, and I think he was speaking more about boomers, but this exists for that other, the true believing class. Government is their God. Like, see, that was their way to their Puritan way. It was their church. It was their way to enforce things. Those people we're starting to see them undergo the mental health collapse, and they're starting to lose it.
I have to show you this. I have to show you this. So, you guys know what the Bulwark is?
They're awful. They're awful.
They are absolutely. This is Lynn Cheney's private stand team, right? The people who love Lynn Cheney, so I've been monitoring them to see where the enemy is, right? And they put out, like, I'm like, why aren't they putting anything out? And they put out this video, right, where they decided, oh, we're not going to talk about politics today. We're going. They brought Ben Stiller on to ask, are we stuck in the worst universe ever? And like,
it is for them.
It was just a matter of like, I don't want to talk about this. I don't want to think about this. And psychologically, I do have to wonder, like, okay, how are they going to deal? Like, at least we're going to get a certain number of people who are going to say, oh, I was always on the Trump train. Right? You know that some of these purple-headed people is completely going to forget that they ever were against Donald Trump.
That's right.
Right? And that's part of like Reagan. Yeah, Reagan is really, really popular, right? But he was incredibly controversial. And sometimes you talk, especially to older people, right? To people who are in their 60s and 70s, and the bitterness about Reagan, it's just suddenly hits you.
Everybody after the second act of the Great War, every political candidate, not the first one, but right after that, highly contentious, right? All this groundbreaking stuff, like, oh, Kennedy leveraged TV, right? And and there's all this, right? There's all this way of talking about it. I'm not gonna say it's good or bad, right? But the mental health problem, like, people don't understand how that works, right? So you had the first break, which was COVID, which was the lie of social distancing. There's no such thing as social distancing. That is evil. you may want to physically distance from people. That's a different, it turns out to also be a bad plan, but whatever, right? Social distancing was evil, right? And so you've got all these people that are, whatever you think, they're pushed closer to the edge. It doesn't matter whether or not you're close to psychosis. You're closer after social distancing. We all were. Like, I'm not exempting anybody, right? I'm saying like that definitely happened, right? And then some people, like to this day, I've been up to New England a couple times, and I have a long-term illness. Everybody knows this. I have an immune system problem, right? Every once in a while, I get very, very sick, right? It's not severe enough that I need to be hospitalized or anything, right? But it usually knocks me out for a few hours. I don't feel well, and I can't think straight and things like that, right? So everybody knows this. My uncle was asking me how he's doing. I was like, oh, on the way up, I ended up sick, and he literally jumped back. And I'm like, I get that you live in Massachusetts, but what do you, and this was 3 months ago. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, I actually started yelling at him and said, okay, listen, we don't have COVID in South Carolina. It doesn't exist. If that's what you're worried about, you should move, because it seems to only be up here. Like, I was completely done. I'm like, what? These people are already insane. Now you have a worldview collapse. That's another problem. And then you stack on that the fact that people are going to notice that some people are not changing, even though the conditions around them are changing. And so they're going to distance themselves socially for real from those people. And so the people who are crazy and doubling down are going to be more isolated. And so, Jacob, you and I can agree, jumping on I was always on the Trump train, late in cognitive dissonance is probably not good, but it's better than the alternative, which is doubling down. Neither is a good strategy, right? Because you're still not integrating the fact that you were wrong, which means you can't see when you're wrong in the future. So that's pretty bad.
Oh, I mean, I voted
worse.
I voted for Johnson in 2016, and anybody who wants to, Facebook has taken down their notes thing where I used to write my long things. I wrote this very long thing about how I will always be never Trump, et cetera, et cetera. I will never vote for Trump. I'm not going to vote for Hillary Clinton, but that was before the election in 2016. Right. And, you have to update your priors. And this is the importance of repentance. Repentance. Yes. Think again.
Yeah, I mean, I wish people would not be so stubborn, but people get attached to, ideologies they have as part of their identity, unfortunately, in our culture. And I wish that would stop. But I think the psychology behind the Liz Cheney's, you were mentioning, or is it Lynn Cheney or Liz Cheney? I forgot.
I forget too.
Yeah, it was. You were mentioning the Bulwark, and you said they were like Liz Cheney stands. That's like what, like 1 or 2% of the country about.
0. No. And this is the funny thing. Apparently, some U.S. aid money was making its way, like, to the Bulwark. They're denying it, and frankly, I posted on Twitter. I don't know if it's worthwhile trying to be incredibly diligent about the actual facts right now, because things are flying so fast. Everybody, like, to some extent, I think the best thing you can do is just go on with your life, not pay attention to any of these things, and suddenly wake up in 3 months and find out, like, Bill Kristol is no longer a person anybody talks to or like
cared about.
I thought he already was. I thought he already was somebody nobody pays attention to.
Well, we all know the name, right?
Yeah, everybody knows the name.
Where so really for me the best place to know what's going on is when at Friday night Shabbat, right? My sister invites all the family over, right? And we're sitting around the table and we're eating, and like, I know that if I mention PewDiePie, right, I know my nephews all know who PewDiePie is,
Right.
right? But and if I mention Joe Rogan, well, now everybody knows who Joe Rogan is. But
Right.
a few years ago, the only people who knew, hey, Marcus, I would love for you to jump on, Marcus. If a few years ago, Joe Rogan, again, it was only my nephews and the young people who knew who Joe Rogan was, right? The question is, who are these names who are present in
The culture.
our culture, right? Who are the people getting invited to Davos and the World Economic Forum, right? WEF. Well, the fact is, things are changing, and I seriously believe now ARC is going to be the new World Economic Forum, and suddenly you're going to start hearing the name Jonathan Pajot.
Okay.
You're going to start hearing from, like, in real life, other people saying to you Jonathan Pajot.
Okay. I mean, maybe. I mean, like, I'll think about it, but he's pretty. I don't think many people in our culture know about him who aren't deep in the Jordan Peterson sphere.
Correct. Right now. And I'm not saying like even this year. Right? It might be 2, 3, 4 years from now. Right? But the fact is, Jonathan Pajot, being a very influential artist at and this is why I keep on going back to, like, Grim Grizz, right? Well, we have to have a new WEF, Emma. We have to. These structures don't go away. If Hillsdale becomes the new Harvard, right, which is a possibility, actually, that Hillsdale is going to be the new Harvard, right? Something has to be the new Harvard. And this is one of the things that I think a lot of people, I think, especially on our side, have fallen into the end of history trap, right? Which is, hey, look, all of these things we thought were absolutely impossible are suddenly happening. And that's why I keep on talking about Antichrist, right? It's not, the Messiah's not here yet, right?
All right, I'm gonna head up the LDA pretty soon.
Okay, let me pull.
So, like, yeah, it's not, it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be this idealistic, wonderful thing that there's no longer going to be pain in the world, and Mark's no longer going to get sick, and suddenly I'm going to get I'm going to get the $8 million Politico was getting for Fountain of Comfort. That's not what's going to happen.
Right.
At the same time, a lot of great things. Look, for me, the idea personally, like, especially a lot more than most people in the Jordan Peterson sphere, the idea that the Palestinian issue is going to become less of an issue.
That would be nice.
Wouldn't it? Like,
it would be great.
And that doesn't mean that suddenly all the Palestinians are going to disappear. They're not. Right? There's going to be appreciable change and improvement. But that appreciable change and improvement is not, and this is the binary thinking that people get into, and the apocalyptic thinking that people get into, right? Where they start thinking, oh, everything's going to be wonderful in ways that it's not. And so when you say, do we need a new WEF? Of course we do.
It's going to happen. It's an inevitable pattern at a layer of hierarchy that needs it.
Yeah.
The question is it run by good people or bad people? And no one's focused on good and bad. And so we just get corrupt random garbage. That's the problem.
Yeah, and I think with regards to like, is the new WEF going to be run by competent people? Are the new institutions going to be run by competent people? The problem is that competent people who let incompetent people influence them become incompetent, and this is why I think Arendt was largely right in her analysis of Nazi Germany.
Yeah, or worse yet, right? Which is again the real issue is competent evil people are bad for everybody. Like the evil genius is an archetype no one talks about, but is the most prescient and important archetype, right? This is why people don't believe Soros ever did anything bad. Not all of us. Some of us know, right? Because some of us actually listen to what he says and go, well, that's as alarm belly as it gets, right? But like, because he made a lot of money, people say he must be smart. Also false, by the way, right? But it doesn't matter, right? And smartness is goodness, and that is not true. That is not true, and that's a big problem, especially when you've got binary thinking. But the bigger problem is everybody thinks that we're not, because at some level, I'm not being doomsday about this. At some level, we're rearranging the chairs on the Titanic, right? Like this. We still got to deal with the good bad issue and make bad punished again, because we haven't done that. The sacrifices haven't occurred. Like me not getting my paycheck, my $68 million paycheck as a Politico, organization is not sufficient punishment to send a signal to say, don't do this. All it says is, if you do this and get caught, eventually the money will run out, but you'll still have been successful. That's not good. Like, we need it to be unsuccessful. Otherwise, people will follow the pattern. And because you have no choice. And that's what I mean. Like, you can say, oh, politics is solved, or politics is improved, or politics is better. Yeah, but those bad people are going to do something else in another arena, and you're not going to notice it because now you're paying attention to politics and not wherever they are, right? This is the game that they have a one-up on you on, because there's lots of places to put your attention, and it's very hard to see where it should go at any given moment. And maybe you can't, right? In which case, you've got to find people to follow who aren't going to lead you astray. And that is a big problem, but that's easier to solve than trying to find all the bad guys and what they're up to. That's way too big.
So Emma says, no longer having a weird globalist elite control things is pretty far from end of times utopianism. Why is it inevitable? Isn't it pretty new? I don't think it is very new. I really don't.
I mean, the medieval time. Hello, like all the kings are cousins, right? Like in Europe.
I was thinking exactly the same thing. Like the families, right? They're all the marriages and stuff. Yeah,
the elites are in active collusion with one another for whether or not to go to war and how. Like, most wars were funded by the populace, but some wars were funded by other countries because, oh, my cousin needs some money and I happen to have some extra. Like, like this has always been the pattern. It hasn't gone away. It's not going to go away. The other layers of the hierarchy, which you may not understand, fair enough. Like, this is hard, right? Hierarchy is real. It's older than trees. It's not going away. They have to behave differently from you and I because they're in a different place. People don't understand. Like, what you could look at something weird. Like, you could say, why are all these streaming services popping up? They're copying a pattern from Netflix. Literally, that's all they're doing. They're saying, oh, this is the new era of TV. They're wrong about that, by the way, right? It's already, that ship's already started to turn. You can see this, right? Streaming isn't working financially. But they were like, oh, we're going to follow Netflix because it's the most wildly successful company that we know about. And then all the other people with companies, not in the industry, not in the media industry, all these other people with companies go, well, let's fund, right, that project. And this happened with the cable companies in the early days. You look at the cable companies, you're like, why don't the cable companies all own pieces of each other? That's less true now, but like 20 years ago, Like every cable company owned a piece of every other regional cable company, even when they were competing, because that's how the system works. That's how the system has to work. We don't operate at that level in our daily lives that we notice, but we do, right? It's just, it looks different at a higher scale up the hierarchy. You're not getting rid of the elite. That isn't going to happen. What you want is a good elite, and you're not going to get a perfectly good elite. That's why they used to train the children of the elite in how to rule. And if they didn't end up in rulership, they ended up in the noble class, right? And the noble class is important because if the rulership gets wiped out, the noble class gets promoted, and at least they have some skills in that area, because it just turns out maybe you could be a world-class computer programmer or a good statesman. I don't know, but I suspect that's true. And I suspect the number of people that could be good at any one thing is far smaller than anyone suspects in real life. It probably follows something like the Pareto principle, right? Where the top 1% is much better than the next 9%. And that gap is roughly equivalent to how much better that 10% is to the remaining 90%, right? It's a non-linear scaling. And that's the Pareto, understanding the Pareto principle, read Taleb. It's really important, right? Because then you're like, oh, because that's part of the pattern that's everywhere. It's in nature. It's absolutely everywhere, right? Peterson talks about that. It governs the pattern of the distribution of stars in the galaxy. That's how powerful the Pareto principle is. It's absolutely everywhere, right? But once you understand that and the fractal nature, the scaling, you're like, oh, elite is not optional. Having a WEF-like thing, although the WEF was a bad idea, is not optional. It's going to happen. The key is to make it happen with good people running it, because some things are going to happen.
Agreed.
I'm just reading some of the comments. They're interesting.
Which comment?
KL,
The
War Machine.
What's he saying?
He said Trump is about to sanction South Africa. That's huge. I don't think that's huge,
I think,
or in any way surprising. And yeah, War Machine is really a money machine.
It's not.
It's not. Yeah,
You can't reduce things down. War involves money. Period. Right? The two things are not separable, and you can't collapse one into the other. That makes no sense. I mean, that's
it's
the binary
materialist.
thinking and
It's a very materialistic analysis, and
right, exactly.
materialism, unfortunately, it's unfortunate to see how much materialism has seeped into populist right thinking.
It's a flat world, and that's the problem. Is that reducing things down to one thing when they have two words for them is usually a bad idea. Not always. Sometimes the words are wrong, but like it usually means you're not able to think about the thing in all of its parts.
I would also add, when it comes to South Africa, I mean, I don't think that's a huge deal. I do believe we should sanction South Africa and give asylum for white South African farmers.
If they want it. That's the problem. Well, you know who should do that? The UK should do that. But they're not gonna, right? Because they're way more corrupt than we are. Like, wait until you see this happen in the UK. If it does, it may not, unfortunately, but wait until this happens in the UK and you see what's been going on in the UK for a lot longer than it's been bad in the US. The thing is, people don't realize Europe's in way worse shape than we are. It's not even close. And unless you've been paying attention, you probably haven't. Fair enough. It's too hard to pay attention to. You're going to be real shocked as the dominoes start falling in Europe. The EU is already on the verge of collapse, and it's not going to take much. And if they don't give up their crusade against Russia real quick, that's going to collapse for sure, and they're not going to survive at all. They have no chance.
Maybe the Russia thing is a factor. I think the environmentalism, the anti-oil drilling, and mass immigration are bigger factors.
But that's what made them weak. I mean, that's why they're not able to do what they want to do, which is, prop up Ukraine and kill all the Ukrainians for some reason. I don't understand any of that personally. The best way that I know how to understand it is just say the word evil, and say, yeah, whatever's going on there is evil. They shouldn't be killing Ukrainians and using the Russians to do it. That seems silly. There's a way around this problem that would stop the killing, and maybe no one's happy about that, but also it stops the killing. Like I don't know why the killing is better than the negotiation for lands that the people there don't want to be associated with Ukraine anyway. But whatever.
Well,
I mean, what do I know? I just still think killing is the worst thing.
I mean, you might be right, Mark. I haven't looked into the issue much. I just think that if right wingers in Europe had the balls to deport the Islamic terrorist communities and to stop the environmental nonsense, to drill baby drill, then sure, Ukraine might be get like too much funding for Ukraine might be an issue. But like, I think that's more derivative of an issue than immigration or environmental.
They don't. Unfortunately, Kirk, the idea of right wing to us has no equivalent in Europe. There are no right wingers in Europe. And that's been a problem. This is why Europe's in really bad shape, because they have no balancing point. They have far leftists and slightly less far leftists. And that's the thing that, like Sargon of Akkad's been pointing out about the UK government. He's like, yeah, we elected the Conservative Party, and what they did was increase the immigration after we told them no. and he's like, so really our right wingers are doing the same thing as our left wingers. And like, where's your right wing? Oh, well, now it turns out to be the quote Reform Party or something in the UK, apparently. And that's the level of resolution I have on it, really, right? I sort of rely on Sargon of Akkad, Carl Benjamin, because he's pretty good, although like he's way far away. Like he's still not anywhere near where he needs to be to understand what's really going on. He's just a lot better and closer than most of his peers. And so he's very useful to understand what's going on, particularly in the UK, also in parts of Europe, but the UK in particular. But Europe is such a mess now. Of course, it's not a country, so that's part of the problem. Like France has been a complete dumpster fire for like 10 years, and no one realizes it.
Yeah, and I don't know as much about European politics as many other people, and you might know more about it than I do. I'm curious because I don't pay attention to Sargon of Akkad. Where do you think Sargon's analysis is lacking?
He doesn't understand the role of he doesn't have a good definition of religion. So he doesn't understand the role of religion, and he doesn't understand good and bad, right? And like I don't think he still holds this position, but a while back, a few years ago, he did an argument where he said you can derive an ought from an is, and obviously you can't do that. I don't know why people keep trying. I'm like, you do realize there's thousands of years of philosophical discussion about this, and it's never been resolved, right? And they don't, and they say, no, you can do it's this materialistic garbage, right? You're stuck in materialism, and that's part of the problem. Is that he is still stuck in a flat world, and he is still thinking politics is the thing. And politics is not the thing. It's goodness and badness that's the thing. And if we don't call out evil where we see it, this is going to get worse. Now, we may have to do... Let me see. Someone may have to do more than merely call out evil. This is where hierarchy becomes important, right? You have to outsource the things that are bigger to you than you to people higher up in the hierarchy. And yes, we have a big problem with that now because we have a bunch of people in the hierarchy that don't belong there. That's what this is all about. They've been propped up purely by finance, by economics, to be more important, more authoritative, to be put in positions of leadership when they are not authoritative. They should not be leading. They don't have any of the skills, and they're bad people, which is the biggest factor, right? And so, right, now we have a discernment problem about where proper hierarchy is or should be. That's the problem, right? That's the current problem. And you can't resolve that. So you're going to end up following certain people, right? And I used to keep an eye on Tim Pool when he was skyrocketing up, and Sargon of Akkad. That happened roughly at the same time. Sargon's got a longer ramp than Tim Pool does. But and I don't watch either of them anymore that much, although I still track Sargon because he's still super interesting and has, if you need to know about the UK, man, he's really got his finger on it, right? And he's willing to look at numbers and not get tied up in other factors. So when you sort of understand people are going to follow something at all layers of the hierarchy, and if you're not looking up at the highest goodness, we'll call it, right, or the ineffable goodness or something, it's harder to discern the lower layers. And that, I think, is where the discussion that Jordan Peterson started, hence the Peterson sphere, it came into things. Like, no, you guys don't understand. And if you listen carefully to Maps of Meaning, maybe more than once, because I had to listen to it 3 times, and that's me taking notes, you will finally notice that what he's doing is he is dismantling and destroying your idea of how you think the world works, inserting hierarchy and showing you the importance of understanding why it's important to look up at the highest thing, because that enables you to see the proper ordering lower down the stack.
Yeah. Mark, have you ever seen that meme where you have this like intelligence distribution spectrum where you have the dumbest people saying something and you have the smartest people saying something and then you have the midwits denying that? Have you ever seen that meme?
Yes, many
So
times.
so I think with regards to, there's a famous saying called like politics is downstream from culture, and in
Yeah.
my view, it's the dumbest people and the smartest people who recognize that politics is downstream from culture, and the midwits who think politics is everything and that culture doesn't matter. Because in many respects, it's like the sort of quote unquote policy wonk class who think the tax suggestion or this or that, that's going to save everything, ignoring the religious and philosophical underpinnings. And it's the ignorant masses who are
I
Bible
wouldn't try to
thumpers.
understand anything that way ever. 3 buckets is not enough to understand what's going on.
Okay, I want to hear what Yoav and
David.
David have to say.
Yeah.
David
Yoav?
first.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Yoav is a real gentleman. I wanted to tell you, Jacob, that I watched the Ezra Klein video that you were making reference to the other day when you were doing your stream and you were talking about Don't Believe Your Lying Eyes, and you recommended this Ezra Klein video. I watched it, and within 24 hours of you telling me to watch this video as just a Don't Believe Your Lying Eyes, I had multiple other people that I knew sharing it on his side, actually saying this guy really understands what's happening.
Yeah, I've heard that from several people that that is. So this is the thing, Ezra Klein, and frankly, at this point I have to suspect that he might be controlled opposition. Ezra Klein and the New York Times.
The Bannon bit is great. The Bannon bit actually helps explain a little bit of stuff. And I felt like that was a good quote for him to take. But his conclusion, sorry, keep going.
Yeah, no. All great falsehoods have a bit of truth in them, right? This is what Satan, the serpent, does, right? He baits you with a kernel of truth. I really don't know what's going on, because okay, the New York Times is telling people, hey, keep your powder dry, and at the same time it's like there's blitzkrieg going on.
That there's people just going hold. That it's like that's exactly what you want to be happening right now. Is for people to be shouting hold.
I would be willing to pay Ezra Klein to be saying the stupid things he is saying right now, whereas for the past 8-10 years I was willing to pay people never to listen to Ezra Klein say anything ever.
Yeah, but that's inevitable, and it's part of this is, and I've been telling people this for decades now. These people are not scary if you stand up to them and say things like, I will run you over with my car if you block the road. They actually will move because they're weak, and if they know you're not, they will bow immediately. I've been doing it to them for years. I'll just punch you out. You can say whatever you want, but I can also punch you. Pick your battle, right? And they won't. I mean, you have to be in person to do it, clearly. And that's why the internet can be bad, right? Because it enables people to do things without immediate physical consequence. But when you put physical consequence on the line to these people, they fold so fast. It's kind of hysterical.
Yoav.
Well, first, different countries are different countries. Never fall into the illusion that you understand a country different than yours. This discussion has been mostly about the US. I have no opinion about it because I don't know the US. I have some insight in the UK because I have friends and family there. It's part of the culture of what's happening in the UK that you don't talk about what's happening in the UK. Sargon Akkad is the extreme point of maximizing wisdom and ability to speak. I don't think you find a better viewpoint into the UK. So you ought to trust him. You ought to trust that he's right in what he's saying, even if it doesn't strike you like being the correct thing. What I remember for things that he says, it's a very stratified society. And it's a society in which it is possible to contemplate a situation in which one layer of the society really hates the other layer. I mean, that there is really real malice in it.
Karl Marx was writing in England.
Yeah.
Some country that I have no idea, I mean, I have no knowledge about is Sweden. I have absolutely no knowledge of the land or the people or the culture, but it is a remarkable country in the way that it resembles the UK, the way it behaves like the UK. So leads me to think that it's maybe also a stratified society. In contrast to Norway, which I know isn't. Norway traditionally in the past was always poor. All layers of the Norwegian society were poor. So it didn't get as stratified as Sweden did. And then when one gets to the Middle East and Israel, I'm trying to tell you politely, whatever you think about the Middle East and Israel is probably not true, because you probably have no idea what's going on. If anybody is thinking about Jordanian soldiers entering the West Bank, doesn't understand what Jordan is. I don't want to say more about Jordan. And I'm very suspicious about Egypt. Young God said, I'll say it, what will you say? I don't believe in the goodwill of Egypt. Not until this affair in Gaza is fully understood. I don't fully understand the role of Egypt in this war of last year. Cannot be that it didn't have any role in that war. You just look at the map. It's impossible. And you don't hear about the role of Egypt in this war because, like in certain countries, you cannot say a bad word about a person if it has a black skin. It's not the right thing to do to talk about Egypt. I'm going to leave it at that. Going back to the relationship between U.S. and Israel, Israel is a province of the U.S.
Correct.
and to a large extent. And what is happening nowadays in the US, as far as I can, that's easy to say, the flow of money is being exposed. And
Right.
certainly, of course, there is a flow of money from the US to Israel. The question is, do we know of all the channels, and do we know of what has been this money, what use was being made with this money in Israel in terms of Israeli politics? Must have been something. I mean, it's if they have meddled with the politics of, let's say, Macedonia, I'm sure there was something happening in Israel. Now, what do I know? I know what my eyes see. If you see a street sign 10 meters by 3 meters on the major highway, this is making some political claim. You might say that it was financed by some concerned citizens of Israel. Each one of them has put $100, and together they bought the sign for 2 weeks because the issue was really very important to them. If you see 10 such signs on the motorway for 3 years, you know that in those terms of inflation and job uncertainty and a war going on and whatever, it wasn't financed by concerned Israeli citizens. Every Israeli citizen can see the signs going on a major highway every day for years. Nobody is asking, where is the money coming from?
Right.
Okay, I should shut up now.
No, I mean, the Middle East is a mess, and it's our fault, right? The Great War and how we resolved all that, and, you know, helping the UK and screwing over Lawrence of Arabia, right? It's all the way back there. It has nothing to do with now, is just the aftermath of that initial set of mistakes. It's a big problem, though, because I don't even think the people in the Middle East know how the Middle East works anymore, because it's such a mess. Like all the cultures are mixed up.
Not your fault. At 8, an hour from now, we're going to resume our study of the Bible at the times of King David. And there are some historical mentions there that go back even 500 years before that. So we're talking about 2000, the year 2000 BC. And I can assure you, for all we know from archaeology and from the Bible, and the Middle East was a great mess when you still were hunting mammoths in in Europe. It's something we do to ourselves.
Well, that's
Thanks
true.
for your help, but we would have done it anyway.
Well-
Maybe. I think the U.S. made a lot of things worse because they were trying to save British oil, basically. And there's an argument to be made that British oil should have been saved, but we've never had that discussion, right? Or how, or any of that. But yeah, I mean, the Middle East has always been a mess. It's always going to be a mess, probably, right? Just because of the physical conditions on the ground.
Just practically for today, I think like something that we should all keep in mind and should be surprising not at all, but the role of liturgies is to remind us of that which we already knew.
Yep.
There's a lot of people who together do make decisions in our societies, each society, right? And look, the people in the United States, our leaders make a lot of decisions. Chuck Schumer has been in government for many, many years, and he's had a lot of influence in what happens in the United States, but he's also had a lot of influence in what happens in Israel. And you better know, if you have any doubt, that Israel, to the degree, people in Israel, to the degree that they've been able to, have been also trying to influence Chuck Schumer and his elections, right? There's a lot of reciprocity and influence going multiple ways. This is a very complex system, and it's going to continue to be a complex system. But it's kind of like, I keep on going back to fluid dynamics, right? And there are all these currents coming in different ways, and you can't really predict how they're going to come together. But it seems like with the internet and personal computing especially, there's been a dye put into the water. And that is allowing us to see the currents in ways that we didn't see before, which can be good. But that doesn't change the fact that we're dealing with fluid dynamics. And Yoav yesterday, last night, was reminding us, look, we're still dealing with human beings. And this is the number one thing I say to all the tech people who think that computers are going to save the world, and who keep on, including Chazi, who constantly tells me, oh, with computers, suddenly everything's going to be different. And my answer to him is, there are still going to be people at the at the keyboards.
Yeah.
And as long as there's a human component at the keyboard, human failing is going to be integral as part of that system.
Well, and humans act, and like computers only send information, right? And what you do with that information is always a function of a human agent, irrespective of what people say. I'm a technology expert. Sorry, it always comes down to people. And even if they have good intent, if they implement incorrectly, the problem remains. I mean, it's perfectly correct. The problem is still humans. We're not getting around that. And that's to my earlier point. If you don't understand and look up in the hierarchy and understand religion as the important thing that helps you as a human, understand other humans and regulate your human behavior so that you're better, and you can recognize good and bad people, then nothing is going to change. We're just rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. Like, we really have to embrace what Peterson pointed at, imperfect though that may be, incomplete though that may be, to PVK's excellent point, maybe his only excellent point at this point, but whatever. Like that's important, and that importance cannot be overstated. And it is the importance that we have done away with. But it's not enough to talk about, which religion and that stuff. No, we can't do that either. That's way too low. We've got to aim it all the way up and look at that guiding star, at that goodness.
Yeah, so people have commented that Israel is a vassal state of the US. Yes, to a large extent, yes. Also, Israel is a very religious place. Either Islam or Judaism, religion is strong with us. Cannot be a fully vassal of the US while being religious. So it will be quite a stubborn and ungovernable vassal for a while.
Look, human beings are not easily governed.
Yeah,
they're
don't
not.
Want to be. Yeah. They want to be individuals, and they're not, and that causes all kinds of problems. And irrespective of what governments do or say, or what incentive plans are in place, and this is what we've seen, right? Irrespective of incentive plans, people are going to do what they're going to do. and it just like this is like Sargon of Akkad is telling you, I succeeded without any of this USAID money. Now what? Right, because he did it in spite of the incentives being against him, because incentives they don't work the way you think they work.
Yeah. I mean, I used to listen to Sargon a lot, basically before Jordan Peterson.
Yeah,
I used to constantly listen to Sargon of Akkad, and he's a smart person. Lately, I think he's been captured by his own group, because and this is a lot like Tucker Carlson, who also, I believe, has become captured. Look, you think in community with others.
Right.
And the community of others you surround yourself with will cause you to have certain blind spots. And like that's part of what makes me so focused on secured distributed cognition here. Right? It's like, okay, we're going to think in community with each other. Who exactly and how exactly are we going to order this as best we can, while recognizing we're human beings and we're going to fail, and having a level of humility and wisdom, which hopefully, and this has really been John Vervaeke's message, is when you have people together, they just work. Multiple people working in a team are capable of things that individuals are simply incapable of.
Right. That's the hierarchy and the scaling. And we don't, people who understand how things work at the individual level don't understand one layer up at all, much less several layers up, because the hierarchy is deeper than you think. And that's design hats. Nice. Maybe Sally will design us some hats. But that's the issue, is that everybody thinks they know, even John Vervaeke, who's just so close and so far away at the same time. I think a better thing to talk about, which is a smaller step, but a much better step, is actually Paul VanderKlay's "We Outsource Our Sanity." Right. Sanity is not something you have for yourself, by yourself, in yourself. That's not how sanity works at all. Right. And so the first step is to understand where you're outsourcing your sanity. Because as you outsource your sanity to Tucker Carlson, now I have to get a hat. I've only got one handy. The others are all put away. As you outsource your sanity, right, that person also becomes captured by you, because you're in relationship. Right. And that's really the problem, is that you can't get around that. It's not something that you can fix. So it's not technically a problem, because there's no solution, right? It's something you have to be aware of, though. Like, who are you following and why? And then when they go wrong, what's your mechanism for noticing that they're going off the rails, right? Because Tucker Carlson went off the rails at some point. And then what do you do about it, right? Do you switch alliances? Do you stay there and try to make it better? You know, what do you do? Because you have to have a plan for all that. And that's where we fail, because we're trying to fix the thing. It's bigger than you. You're not fixing it. Get over yourself, right? But you can move. You can change. You can go, oh, the place I was outsourcing my sanity to is no longer serving me. Therefore, I'm going to outsource it somewhere else.
Yoav, what's going to happen in Israel?
The easy answer is whatever it always been. We were literally shooting at each other around 1945 on ideological reasons. It has been worse, has been better. I think as in 1945, the extremists are usually coming from the left. They are, I'm more worried on extremists from the left than on the right. Oh, that's better. There should be inquiry into the war, definitely how it started. I don't see any impartial body that can take this inquiry. That means it's going to be a festering wound for forever. There is the issue of the role of the Supreme Court within the Israeli democracy. The pendulum was swinging too wide to one end. How can it be possibly be swinging back without too much damage? I do not know. As usual, life is going complicated, and you just have to trust what we call the destiny of Israel. Just trust it blindly and go on. Cannot be more specific for that. I mean, I know more of the past than of the future.
What do you think? What do you think is gonna? Well, I kind of sort of agree with that.
Okay. Now I can.
It doesn't work everywhere.
Okay, now I can.
Nice idea, but it doesn't work
Carl
everywhere.
W. say we need a constitution. That's exactly what we cannot have, because as I said, we have a very strong religious wing, either Muslim or Jewish. They will not accept a constitution because the Bible is the constitution. They cannot possibly accept a constitution. This, you have to realize that. Now, what we have a Declaration of Independence, which is the declaration. It's a non-binding legal document. And that was signed by all parties at the point when Israel was created in 1948. It was signed by all parties, including the religious parties, on the understanding that it's not a binding document. Now that the role of the Supreme Court is in play, what my friends, family, and neighbors are doing are trying to establish the Declaration of Independence as a constitution. And we say as the keystone of the political structure. Although it's too general actually to be of any use. So no, we're not going to have a constitution. The Ben-Gurion, for all of the bad press he gets from Jacob, had at least one wise decision, that he insisted that our political structure will be a fractional representation. So we don't have the problem of that you have to select between two parties, two of them bad. You have at least 10 parties fraction to select from.
10 of them bad. All of them bad.
Yeah, but when you have selection of 10, some of them should be at least partially less bad than others. Like if your rabbi recommends one party, then you can vote for that party because that's the specific party recommended by your rabbi of your specialist Hasidic movement. That means that Parliament is going to be always quarrelsome and split. But yes, we are Jews. We are quarrelsome and we split. And that's the way we work. That's absolutely fine.
What do you think is going to happen with Gaza?
There is a well-known speech by our famous General Moshe Dayan, I think dated 1954 or thereabout. Some soldiers was killed on the border, and he was giving a speech about it, and he said the Gaza problem is going to be forever. It's just going to be. This is our course. We have to bear it. Not in so many words. And yes, they had the opportunity. They were giving a self-rule. I remember the times when I had to renovate my house. Workmen from Gaza arrived to Tel Aviv, and they were working on the renovation, and they were getting very well paid for it. And they were bringing the salary back to Gaza. And I trusted them inside my house, no problem about it. And then trouble starts, and then the borders started to shut down. As trouble increased, borders become more and more closed. You cannot blame governments and leaders about it, as I keep saying. It was an individual decision by every person involved. A lot of them were intimidated. I mean, they had their they have their families. That's room service. They had their families. You can distinguish between Jewish settlement and Muslim settlement in the land very easily by the fence. And Israeli settlements will always be surrounded by a fence. And Muslim settlement will not be surrounded by a fence. That means that the individual well-meaning person, the day laborer in an Arab village is open to intimidation. If he doesn't toe the line of the extremists, people will and do come after him. So people had to make the brave decision that they are going to risk their families and their livelihood and their life, and and stand to evil. Now, what I see in the times of the pandemic, in 2022, nobody in any country could have done it. Nobody in any country stood up to evil against even lighter intimidation. So I don't blame the people of Gaza, but still, it was still their decision, and it was going to be their decision next time around.
Do you think people are going to leave Gaza?
Lots of people will leave. Of course they will. They have no houses. They live in tents. They have no job. I mean, there's no jobs in Gaza except rebuilding Gaza.
Where are they going to go, and how many people are going to go?
Normally, I will say they have nowhere to go, but you don't know. Maybe Sweden will accept them. Who knows? I mean, why not? Why not another million?
I don't think it's going to be Sweden.
No,
Yeah, I know.
Nobody in their right mind should accept them. Nobody. But still, I mean, I'm not going to take them into my house, that's for sure.
Yeah. Michael, what do you have to say?
So my godfather grew up in Palestine, and the generation before him, and then also his generation that left. He left in his like early teens, or not early teens, late teens, early 20s. Most of them ended up in Chile. There's a huge Orthodox Palestinian community out in Chile. And so the whole group, like, they just mass migrated, most of them that you'll find there. And I suspect that something like that will happen. And I'll be surprised if in 20 years there's not just Trump hotels lining Gaza.
You know, until I saw that, I don't know if you caught any of the stream last night, but yeah, until when I saw the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia signaling, it was like, okay, that's a shift. And this morning, I was on Twitter, and obviously I get more Persian news than most people. And now Reza Pahlavi is hawking what he calls the Cyrus Accords, which I mean, I like the name. I wrote a thing not too long ago, a very long thing on Twitter, talking about how, yeah, there's not going to be regime change in Iran. I don't know. And yeah. Well, that's the thing. You know
I mean,
what?
change is
Well-
its own signal. So
So this is the thing. Pahlavi only matters to one person, I believe. MBS. MBS cares. And if MBS has received assurances in return for helping with the Gaza situation, to have Pahlavi be his puppet in Iran, I mean, there is, I don't know, but the United States, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Egypt, the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, all deciding that that they're going to stand against Erdogan, against Khamenei, and there's a new Arab regime that's going to be taking place. So I see a range of possibilities, all of them with small percentages. That world has shifted dramatically over the past 6 months. And I'll go back to the fall of the Soviet Union. We are looking at something that is very similar to the fall of the Soviet Union.
100%.
And
that's the inversion, right? The inversion is from small percentage events become large percentage events.
right.
Yeah. Because this now is on the table. It wasn't on the table before, but it is now because change is its own signal. So once changes happen, people go, "Oh, change is possible. Let's pay attention to change." Now that can go very, very wrong. Not recommended, but like we're at where we're at. Like we can't get out of it now.
And I mean, for me, the big lessons is don't be Francis Fukuyama.
Right.
This is not the end of history.
Right.
As Yoav reminded me very well last night and several times today, my job here is to stand astride history and say, the Messiah is not here. That is my job here. And at the same time, I think we have to have gratitude for the steps forward. And I do believe there's been significant shifts forward that are not yet visible. Like
Right.
the New York Times isn't covering it. I started today this stream by looking at the Google News. Google News is not giving people a sense of the tectonic shifts that seem to be
Right.
happening, right?
Right. People are
And-
resistant to change, so they don't even want to believe it right now, for sure.
And Friday night at the Shabbat table, right? My cousins and family members who are doctors who didn't spend obsessively watching the news like I did the past week, right? They're going to have things that they'll talk about, but they spent most of the week in doing doctor shit, right? And not paying attention to any of this stuff,
Right.
right? And so if I start like asking them what they think about the peace deal in Gaza, like peace in the Middle East breaking out, they'll be like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. When that's the right thing. It's where do you put your attention? If you have no control over it whatsoever, no influence over it, don't put your attention on. Keep your attention local to the things you have the most control over. And that the thing you have the most control over is yourself. And even that's a terrible level of control, despite what the individualist army may tell you about that.
So I grew up in like deep like Hagee circles, Left Behind, dispensationalist, Pentecostal, low church stuff, right? And one of the things that was a reoccurring theme is that the Antichrist for sure would bring peace in the Middle East. And I'm wondering how they're grappling with that right now, because they are the 2015 base for Trump for sure, right? And I'm really wondering if anybody is like looking back 20 years and thinking about how they were talking about that, looking at the moment now and doing anything with that. Like if they're even discussing it at all. I'm very curious.
I really hope people, Christians, start thinking, if they're going to think of, I really don't like how Trump has become a messianic figure. I would much prefer him as an anti-messianic figure. And come on, guys, this guy, like, he's sleeping with porn stars. And really, I mean, when it comes to religious Christians, there are people who will tell me he didn't actually sleep with her. He denies it.
Yeah,
I don't believe it. This is deep state.
I'm one of those now. I was on the complete other side, right? Like I was helping organize Indivisible events in 2017.
Okay.
Right, like Trump is a scum of the earth, you know.
Well,
like, I've actually ended up on the other side where I think he's the kind of weirdo that doesn't drink, absolutely did not sleep with these porn stars, so on and so forth. Yeah, I know it sounds bananas, but I think I've actually taken that.
This is the unfortunate but binary flip people fall into.
Right.
And this is why I think it's so important to be like, no, he's the type of person who doesn't drink, loves his country, loves his kids, and sleeps with porn stars.
Right.
He used to sleep with porn stars. He's a different man than he was 4 years ago. Never mind 8 years ago. He has gone through fire. And you can accept that a man will go through such an ordeal as he was through in the last 8 years and will be completely changed. Never mind that he got older.
Okay. So I saw a picture of him with Jill Biden, and I posted, and they were just a little too chummy, and I posted on Twitter, this is why I call this man a monster, because I know for a fact that he would definitely sleep with Jill Biden just because that would be a conquest. Like cucking Joe Biden would be so exciting to him.
Yeah, well,
Sally's right in her comment.
I agree he
I
would
saw-
have if he could, but that is not the same as sleeping with porn stars. It's a completely different scene.
That is true. That is true, Yoav. It's a good point. Yeah, I mean, he's definitely changed. The question is how much. And I mean, yeah, the evangelicals in the U.S. I remember the day that I discovered that they had been funding getting all the Jews into Israel because they literally want everybody to experience end times. I was just like, what kind of, like, I had no idea how weird the world was until I discovered that. And,
Those are my
and that was
people.
by accident, right? Because all their money at the time was going into late night advertisements. And because of how I was working and what work I was doing, I was up at midnight at 1 a.m. watching TV, watching these very long form ads. It was like the beginning of the long form advertisement purchases on TV, right? I'm watching these long form ads and like, you need to donate because every Jew you return to the Holy Land. And I was like, well, this is just weird. Why do these evangelicals care about this, right? And then you find out, oh, no. They think that's going to bring the rapture, and that they're on the right side of that equation. Two big bets, by the way, two different big bets. And that's why they're doing it. And I was like, this is how they're spending their money from their church? This is nuts. And
well, to them, it's not a bet.
Small order psyop compared to what's crumbling now.
To them, it's not a bet. It's this is the word of God.
Right, but they also believe the rapture that will bring about the rapture, right? Like, that's one of the words. They're believing a lot of other words of God too. Some of them may not actually be in the book.
I mean, again, all the John Hagee stuff, it's right there, right? I mean, and now I live in San Antonio, right? And Hagee's like down the street, basically, right? He's just down the street. This is like his home turf. And the Trump stuff, it's not, I don't actually like care. It's not a hill I'm going to die on or anything. And I do think that there is an interesting, like, how is this guy different than 20 years ago? And there is difference. How serious is it? And then also, in the past, I don't know. I mean, I see the multiple wives. I get that. I see what Sally is talking about. For sure, I see it. Again, guys, I've been on the far other side of this.
Sally's on your side now with her latest comment, Michael. So.
All right. Yeah, there you go. But I don't know that, like, he's way slippier than any of us really thought, and it's hard to pin him on so many things. I mean, he's obviously shrewd, and he obviously is focused on deals, and he definitely wants to set up hotels on beachfronts, but everything besides that is a little unclear. Like, you sort of know how he's going to deal with North Korea, because he's like, you got a lot of good beachfronts, right? Like, that's
a weird way to think about it, Michael. I see where you're stuck, but and that'll get you a lot further than most people. That over reduction, actually. So that's kind of funny. But yeah, I mean, a lot of people didn't see it, but a lot of people did. I mean, there are people like myself that saw Trump in the 90s on Oprah saying, Bill Clinton, I agree with Bill Clinton. I'm friends with Bill Clinton. I voted for Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton's wrong about China and trade. Like, I watched that live, guys. For whatever reason, whatever weird circumstance, I was actually ever watching Oprah. I actually saw that one, right? Like, he hasn't changed at all in his political position, not even a little bit. He's still a leftist Democrat. He's still not a Republican. That's still why he got most of the vote, right? Because, this is in the numbers, everyone in the U.S. has marched left, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he's now right of moderate somehow. So that makes him look Republican to some people. And the Republican Party, because James Buchanan blew it up decades ago was rightful infiltration. He kind of wrote the playbook on that, and Trump just followed that playbook. And so people don't understand any of that. And fair enough, you shouldn't track stuff like that. It's weird, right? But also, like, that's how we got here, right? And he wouldn't have done it if Obama hadn't said, "Haha, you'll never be president" to him. Which, you know, if you saw like, you can watch the video, like, look at his face, because he's like, freaking excuse me, who the hell are you? You think I can't do something, right? And then he does it. Like, that actually happened exactly that way. I mean, it's not that he didn't have the political ambition earlier or sooner. It's that he had no reason to act on it because he knew he could snap his fingers and get it, and he basically did.
So
Just
I'm
to
wondering.
clarify-
I'm wondering if you would concede, though, that it's like, okay, 2015, here's all this time with the evangelicals. Okay, then here's major turmoil, major persecution, and then there's like a revival, and that revival comes with a new Christian intelligentsia, right? And so now you got like this deeper friendliness with the Catholics and Girardian kind of folks, blah blah blah. You got Vance in there now, and then you have the assassination attempts. And if through all of this, if we were going to pinpoint, or if you would concede that at least one big change is that he's moved somewhere on like a Christian spectrum.
No.
No.
This is all the flat world way of conceiving of things.
Okay.
Right? What happened is, and the reason why the Christians like it, and they
Mhm.
should, like, this is a good thing, is that he moved up. Like, he started talking about, well, you know, and like, this is dangerous stuff. Okay?
Mhm.
Because I'm going to tell you right now, controversial though this may be, this is exactly what happened to Hitler. They tried to kill me and they missed. I must be chosen from God. Right?
Yeah.
But also, that's going to happen, right?
Mhm.
And so what we've had, the quote myth of World War II that we're living in, that Peugeot
Mhm.
correctly identifies, although there's no such thing as World War II, that the idea of World War II is a myth, right? It's such a great war with a break in the middle. It's actually really important to understand it that way. Otherwise, you get stuck in the myth of World War II, right? But
Same page.
like, the idea now, and you hear this in Peterson and you hear it in Vervaeke, these are deep critiques, I will say publicly of them. They are afraid of charisma. Charisma is inevitable, much like hierarchy. That means you have to be careful with it, not try to do away with it, and not demonize it. Because that's never going to work. I think it's very dangerous to try to demonize charisma, because you actually build the thing that you're trying to destroy. You build it up. That actually happened in, quote, World War II, by the way. Like, the end of the Weimar Republic was people trying to, because they didn't have gun ownership in the Weimar Republic, trying to bomb Hitler and missing repeatedly after we'd already had the incident in the trenches, right, of World War I, where everybody else gets wiped out and he survives, right? So he's already got that. And then it's reaffirmed by people trying to stop his cult of charisma, right? And that actually, it's always theoretically possible, I don't want to make a moral statement, that corrupted him. And then had that not happened, and had he come to power without resistance, that he would have been a better leader. There's no way to know. I'm just saying you have to consider these possibilities. In Trump's case, he comes into leadership with these incidents. He's moved up above this ridiculous way of thinking about the world. I'm not impugning your honor, Michael. I'm just saying it's
No.
very
you're fine.
hard for materialists like us, because we're all stuck in the age of gnosis, to understand this higher thing. That's why Peterson's attractive, because he's talking about the up, the star, the orientation, not direction. Direction is too flat, right? So that's what happens. So now the Christians see this. They look up. They know what that looks like, roughly speaking, although I've got my arguments about who knows what. Right? Maybe not so much the Protestants, maybe some of them, because some of them, right? But like the Catholics and the Orthodox in particular are like, no, this is definitely something we recognize. Now, some of them misidentify it. Like, I have my Refusnik friend, who is a Refusnik out of Russia, Orthodox Jewish, very, very good friend of mine. When Trump was first up, he's like, oh no, this is bad guy, right? He was, no, I'm not I'm not for Trump. And I'm like, he's benefiting you guys. He's going to benefit you guys, right? And now I think he's flipped and he's seen like, oh, I was wrong about that. This is a good enough guy, right? He's not the bad guy I thought, right? And but able to recognize, maybe again they get it flipped and they think he's bad when I would argue he's good, and all the evidence might agree with me. But it's that up that matters, and that's what people are missing because we don't see up anymore. We don't look up. We've denied hierarchy. We're talking about equality and equity, and equality doctrines are everywhere in this flat world because everyone's trying to understand. When you try to understand too much of something, your view of it collapses and flattens.
Let me see if I can
that's part of
satisfy
the
the
problem.
language a little bit. I'm going to take one more pass at seeing if I can get you to make a concession, but I want to frame it in a way that I think you'll be more friendly to. So if the top of that hierarchy is hitting the mark, right? So that's the light and the darkness you're aiming. To hit the mark is to like not sin. To miss the mark is to sin. That now, given the events of the last, let's say, 10 years, Trump hits a little bit closer.
Well, I think look, at some level, Trump is the result of the same movement that Tim Pool, Carl Benjamin, and Jordan Peterson are part of, right? Because Tim Pool and Carl Benjamin were both journalistic idealists. In other words, they thought there was an ideal journalism that had been corrupted, and that's what they were fighting. In both cases, Carl Benjamin, not directly, he just got tied up in Gamergate and happened to be competent and said, "No, I'm gonna fix this problem," and he correctly identified it. And now he's got Lotus Eaters. That was not an obvious path for him, by the way. Tim Pool, more directly, no, I've been part of these corporations. I know what they're up to, and this is corrupt, and I'm gonna fix it. And he did, right? To a large extent. I mean, obviously he can't fix it by himself, but like that's their purity belief. But that's higher up the stack. And so in hierarchy terms, you're still too flat, Michael, but that's okay. At least you're up, right? Like this is a huge improvement. In hierarchy terms, the problem is now we're starting to see the depth of the hierarchy. Like, right, because basically, and I'm going to go after you, Jacob, just a little bit here, but it's all in good fun, right? Like Jacob's freaking out, and I'm like, well, no. The guy at the top of the hierarchy, Trump, collapsing the things lower down in the hierarchy shouldn't be surprising. Of course that was going to happen. And those things were fragile, to be fair, which is why it was so easy and quick for Musk and his team to come in and do it, right? And also that you can criticize the bureaucracy of the government for a lot of things, but man, until you understand what mil-spec is, you don't understand how unbelievably, ridiculously OCD the government is about tracking numbers in particular and measuring things. And so, yeah, with a good data scientist in the government, you can find everything in 4 seconds because all the data is there. It just has to be matched. And we have like guys like Musk have better matching algorithms, right? If you know data science, you'll know, oh yeah, there's older algorithms that people are using, older data storage systems, but you can improve them very easily by doing the following things to them, right? It's roughly the Google revolution. It's not about better search. It's about better storage and retrieval, right? And quicker information retrieval. So once you understand that, it's like, well, of course, because he's way up the hierarchy. And now part of, what this stream is about in particular is, oh yeah, look at the top of the hierarchy became a good person instead of a bad person who wasn't using that system and doesn't want it around. And now it's collapsed, and it collapsed very quickly, right? And we don't know the downstream effects of that because the things below, we'll call it the political manipulation, we don't know what they are yet. Like those dominoes are going to continue to fall. We see a few of quick first order effect ones, like, oh, a check is going to USAID. But if you weren't paying attention, and you probably weren't, like, and fair enough, like Vosh is on his stream asking for money all of a sudden when he never did before. So he's got to be downstream of some of this somewhere. And that's not
Hold
my
on.
speculation.
This actually happened. Vosh is now asking for money
Today. This got reported on Twitter before your stream, dude. Like things are moving very fast. And
Things
so
are moving
people are
fast.
speculating that
Okay.
he's downstream from USAID and these other government programs.
Okay, so in 10 minutes, there's the regularly scheduled Bible study. And one thing that doesn't happen on this channel is the discussions of stuff like this interrupts the Bible study. That doesn't happen.
Good.
Um,
Yeah, I just
yeah.
so Michael, I hope you appreciate everything you're saying is perfectly correct, right? But like there's all these layers, these hierarchical layers in the middle. And that's where the chaos is going to be for a while, right? Because as we learn more and as more importantly, as things happen, right? Because we learn after they happen, we don't learn before, right? And we're going to start to see these things, but then we have to keep in mind you can't collapse the hierarchy. That's not going to work. When you try, you get what we had, right? I mean, the left was the flattening, was the equality people. They were the people that want to kill hierarchy, right? We have to replace these things and make them run by good people.
So, real quick, Christian language I would use to describe that, at least to me, maps to what you're saying. You may not agree. Is Trump's sort of like he stepped out on the water, right? And he's like sinking, right? But he kind of like gets his gaze on Jesus a little bit, and he kind of pops back up, and then he like kind of takes it off, and he sinks again into the water, and he kind of puts it back up. And the question is like, okay, he's kind of doing this boy thing.
Yep.
Is he going to set his gaze on Jesus in order to actually stay above the water or not?
Who else could you ask that question of? Have people been asking that question of? Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
And then when he said Jesus is God or whatever the hell he said, and everyone flipped out and nothing changed, right? Because the Christians, the Christians, not the Catholics and not the Orthodox, I would argue, but the mostly the Protestants are very big on the propositions. The question is, what will happen? Because, look, like him or hate him, Trump didn't listen to Steve Bannon, and Steve Bannon was exactly 100% correct, right? And now you're seeing Trump is going, I should listen to Steve Bannon, but he still knows what he was told, right? And he's just implementing what Steve Bannon told him to some extent, and other people too, to be fair. But Steve Bannon was never wrong about any of it. Steve Bannon, and he didn't have the whole picture, granted, but like he had enough of it that had that happen first term, we wouldn't be, quite so far down. But that is the problem, is that, you have to aim up to the non-material, not the material, Adam. And that's what he's doing. And some people are rightly seeing this and liking it, and other people are seeing it and misreading it, and other people are seeing it and going, uh-oh, that's my livelihood on the line. I want my pearls. It's like, well, dive back down to the bottom of the ocean, but good luck.
So, go ahead, Jacob. Sorry.
One commercial announcement. On February 10th, which is this Monday, I am going to have Rabbi Schneur Burton on my channel, and he is in Haredi circles. He's a very, very prominent rabbi. The type of analogy I make to Christians is it's kind of like having a bishop, right? He has that level of ordination, and he is an expert specifically in Moreh Nevuchim, the guide to Perplexed of Maimonides. He knows Judeo-Arabic himself, so he's studied it in the original language. He is a senior editor at ArtScroll, and he's been editing the publication of the works of Maimonides, and so it's a great honor for me to have him on my channel. And later today, in about 5 hours, I am going to have a live stream just talking about having him on and the types of questions I would like to ask him. If anybody has questions that they would like to ask somebody like Rabbi Burton, please do. So one rule that generally pertains to people like Rabbi Burton is when he says something, it's considered something that you can rely on, right? In your life. And in a very real sense, we believe that he has the authority to bind and loosen on earth as in heaven. And therefore, he will, basically, if I ask him something out of left field, he's not going to answer it, because a rabbi like that doesn't just talk extemporaneously about whatever, almost ever. Yoav is kind of skeptical.
I'm fine.
So I am actually preparing a list of the questions, and I'm going to be emailing him tomorrow morning. So if you want questions, and I'll talk about the questions that I'm going to ask him, like a lot of the questions that we've been debating here on here, I'm going to ask him about. I mean, is going to be on my list of questions. What he decides to talk about, I think people will notice my discussion with him is going to be a very different tone than any discussion I would have with anybody else, because certainly in his presence, I have zero. I am not.
You're not worthy.
Enough of a, yeah, I am not enough of a chutzpaniak. I don't have enough audacity to, in his presence, contradict anything he would say. And so
That'll be a miracle to watch, Jacob. I'm looking forward to it.
it definitely will be. I mean, already certain things he said, he was very critical. So one thing I did apologize to him for was a while before I even knew who he was, somebody had sent me one of his tweets where he was very critical of Halachic Man, right? He had read Halachic Man, and he wrote a very critical tweet on there. And I do think I'm going to ask him about that. And my response was, who does this guy think he is? Being critical of Rabbi Soloveitchik. Well, I was not aware that he has the shoulders to speak in such ways critically of Rabbi Soloveitchik, which apparently he does have, right? That doesn't mean I have to agree with him. It does mean that this is somebody I am going to be very respectful of, and I want to hear what his opinions are about a lot of the disagreements, especially that Chazi and I have been having, and things like that. So yeah, that's my commercial announcement. And then let's go around and say last words. Last words, Mr. Mark. Oh, yes, you are.
Okay, my last word is about pyramids.
Yeah.
Not all pyramids are built the same. I accept everything Mark has said about the political structure in the US. I have learned a lot. I thank Mark for that. There are other pyramids. There is the pyramid in Egypt. Under Obama, they have decapitated the pyramid. They replaced the top with the Muslim Brotherhoods, and the deep state sprang back to its former state within a year intact. But that's Egypt. Thank you all.
Mark, final words?
Be careful who you outsource your cognition to, because you will do that.
Yes. Mark very famously said, if you believe you have no religion, one has been provided to you without your knowledge and consent. Very wise words. Kirk, do you have final words?
I'm optimistic about the future.
Very good. Michael, final words.
in our tradition, every time I talk about a pyramid, I usually get corrected and to talk about a mountain instead. And I'm part of a parish for Saint Ephraim, and we consider him the psalmist of the New Testament. And he gets very explicit in exegeting Genesis. There's a mountain with a tree of life at the top, guarded by a wall, cherubim outside with flaming swords. I'll stop there.
Okay. Bible study coming up in a few minutes.
Right,
I'm going to use host's prerogative to put the Reverend Parcells to bed because he does need to get up in the morning.
Sorry,
You are
Reverend. Thank
correct.
you.
But before he goes, I have a question. Let's say, God forbid, that I were to burn somebody at the stake for not being a Trinitarian. And I did not repent of that. Is that a salvation issue?
Sometimes Jacob takes
There's a
that devil's
proverb.
advocate thing too
Isn't there
far.
a proverb that says something like "Don't answer a fool according to his folly."
But there's a proverb that says, answer a fool according to his folly.
There is.
Exactly right. And I'm going to leave it to you guys to determine, which of those was applicable in this situation as I go. So, but anyhow, good.
Thank
It was
you,
good
Reverend.
to, good to
Thank
chat
you.
with you all.
Thank you.
Good night.
The